School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. The Yao mean of revolution and the humiliation is oh so epic. Trump humiliated by Xi Jinping. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, Trump wanted a war, so China humiliated him. And without even having to call Trump, Trump has already folded.
Hello from China. Let me show you the United States products in my home. Nothing. Do you have something from China in your home?
Remember when Trump's tariffs were supposed to be the ultimate power move against China? The big, bold plan to bring back American jobs and stand up to Beijing. Well, fast forward just 1 week, and it's already falling apart. Smartphones, electronics, solar products, all exempt from the tariffs now. So much for taking a hard line. In this video, we're breaking down the chaos.
Trump folded like a lawn chair and has made exempt electronics. What? That's the majority of what you get from China. So you actually absolutely have done nothing to China, and the whole world is laughing at him.
Of Trump's flip-flopping trade war and why it's leaving many people shaking their heads, from angry critics calling him weak to China laughing all the way to the bank. This story is equal parts infuriating and absurd. So what happened? Was this whole thing doomed from the start? Let's dive in and find out.
Well, it looks like the Trump administration has backed down on some of the retaliatory tariffs on China. Specifically, they've said that they are now exempting electronics being imported from China into the United States from those 145% retaliatory tariffs. These include things like smartphones, laptops, semiconductors, computer chips. All of these things we do not have the ability and infrastructure to manufacture here. And this is all due to the pressure from American tech companies like Dell and Apple, who have been saying, dude, you're going to run us into the ground with these tariffs. It's going to cause absolute chaos, part shortages, and even massive layoffs. Let's be real, because those two companies in particular manufacture a great deal of their inventory in China. We've all seen the headlines of Apple flying in plane loads of iPhones to get around these tariffs. Well, now the administration has caved and said, we're going to hold off on at least tariffing those items, import taxing those items. So looks like he's caving to China now.
China folded him. That's the majority of what they're saying. You're taxing nothing. You're doing nothing but insider trading and making money. He has humiliated. He didn't have to do this. But now the whole world knows he's a bluff. He might still take us to World War III, though.
Oh, how do you feel about that, MAGA?
This clip sums up the irony of Trump's latest move. Exempting electronics and solar products from those massive tariffs? Why? Because American tech giants like Apple and Dell were panicking. Without these critical imports, smartphones, laptops, semiconductors, the U.S. supply chain would have collapsed. And let's be real,
So the tech billionaires, they got a break. China don't mind. They're making them billions off their ass, Trump. But the mom and pop, your ass still getting taxed. Your fruits and vegetables and all that type of good stuff, that's still gonna get taxed.
U.S. can't manufacture these items domestically. Not anytime soon.
From South America.
So these exempted products, if you look at it, make up 43 to 45% of China's exports to the U.S. That's around $225 to $236 billion annually. So much for decoupling, right? Turns out the U.S. economy can't just cut ties with China, no matter how tough the talk gets. The list of exemptions includes essential components like, as I said before, solar panels and advanced electronics that the U.S. simply can't produce itself. Honestly, this
Crazy. Trump done made it seem like the U.S. can't go over 1 week. You can't go a week without China. So not any of that tough talk towards China, all that people gonna let, come on, bro. You tried that and failed.
Feels like a classic case of over-promising and under-delivering. When faced with economic chaos, the administration caved fast. Meanwhile, China keeps playing the long game, knowing the U.S. can't function without them.
If Trump wants us to stay the course with his radical plan, you might want to think of a strategy that inspires our confidence, that you all know what you're doing. Like for instance, these tariffs. Is this a negotiation?
The president made it clear yesterday this is not a negotiation.
Let me make this very clear. This is not a negotiation. This is not that. This is a national emergency.
Okay, it's a national emergency. It's not a negotiation. Well, I don't agree, but at least I have some clarity now.
The tariffs give us great power to negotiate. Always have.
Too much rat poison. So what is this a negotiation or is this permanent?
They can both be true. There can be permanent tariffs and there can also be negotiations.
How much White Lotus did you people watch? What is permanence in this negotiated life we live? Have a pina colada.
But this confusion is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the damage caused by these erratic policies. In just 80 days, let's look at what Trump has achieved. He let the US dollar collapse against the euro, destabilizing the currency, pushed bond rates up, worsening US debt problems, forced Europe to pivot back to China, with leaders like Ursula even discussing scrapping tariffs on Chinese EVs. He wiped out trillions in the stock market, shaking investor confidence, and I'm pretty sure he slashed foreign tourism by 30% and scared international students away from studying in the US. And yet, somehow, he's focused on saving plastic straws and boosting water faucet pressure. Oh, and let's not forget, his Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, Juan Soros's right-hand man, is now running the show. Make it make sense. Now, the irony is that these policies aren't making America great again. They're making China great again by alienating allies, destabilizing markets, and pushing the world closer to China. Trump's strategy feels less like leadership and more like...
Now, that's a fact what he's saying. America's getting isolated. And I watched so many different videos, looked at so many different comment sections all throughout Europe. They're all rooting for China. That's crazy. They're all rooting for China to teach America a lesson. Japan, South Korea, and China sat down to discuss business. Trump did that. Trump said Biden pushed China and Russia into each other's hands where they weren't enemies. He has had Japan and China and South Korea sit down. Those people are enemies, but they cannot deal with being bullied and being shut down by the shakedown by Trump. He tripping. And I tell you, he never was going to be able to pull this shit with China. But remember, him and them crooks made a bunch of money inside of trade. They ain't lost nothing.
like a chaotic own goal.
How are you going to bring back American greatness if you keep folding like a cheap suit? Trump exempts smartphones, other electronics from Chinese tariffs. Liberation Day lasted a week. And you expect all of these companies to just start bringing back their manufacturing?
We're the only people, brother, with morals and integrity. That ain't shame on you. We didn't want transgenders reading time. We didn't want tranny reading drag queen reading books to the kids. We didn't want men in the boys' bathroom and the girls' bathroom. We didn't want the kids being transitioned. We were sick of that shit. We wanted that border seal. We were trying to do good work. This man done been compromised, and the small hats are having them to do that. But guess what? Anybody who told us that we shouldn't have voted for him, they never spoke up at all the bullshit policies the Democrats was pushing. We are the only ones with morals and integrity. Y'all remember that? So that's why we got to show the wrong that this dude is doing, especially we voted for him and endorsed him. That's how we keep our motherfucking credibility. We just trying to do the right motherfucking thing.
Keep folding.
Salute, family. We in here.
I know what the hell I'm doing. I know what I'm doing.
You blinked. You blinked again. China called your bluff and you blinked because they know how weak Trump is. Trump is weak. And he shows it time and time again.
It's not Trump that was weak. It's the hand against China. The American hand is weak. It's not. I'm not going to say Trump is weak. No president could have pulled this shit off with China. None of them. There's nobody. Putin couldn't pull this off with China. China is too powerful. And China told the U.S. this. Now, you see how quick they folded them in a trade war? Remember, China told them we're ready for any type of war. Trade or a shooting war. Remember, China said that. They didn't just say they ready for a trade war. They said they ready for a real war, shooting war, whatever the U.S. want to do. They're not going for it.
I love when he gets his sycophants out there to defend his position on something, and then he completely folds the next day. Oh, just wait. Just wait. You got to give it time. You got to give it time. Just trust the process. He doesn't even give it time. He just folds immediately. Immediately folds. He's going to do all these things, right? And no matter what, his obedient and submissive supporters will just continue to cheer, even if it's cheering for the opposite of what they were cheering for the day before. They don't care. They have no held beliefs other than...
That's not true, because we watched a few channels that was backing them, and they are absolutely pissed. Look at Tucker Carlson. They pissed he talking about going to war. They no, hell no. I looked at them channels. They don't want no fucking war. Those who love Israel didn't know a lot. That's not true. But Trump, he on that, well, I don't have to run again BS. But what he don't understand is there won't be no, they will lose in 4 years. They absolutely will lose in 4 years if he keep this bullshit up. That's what's gonna be so crazy. Because then the perverts who want the drag queen story reading time and want boys to get transitioned and all that type of crazy ass shit, then they're gonna be back in power, bro. And it's gonna be all his motherfucking fault.
Cheering their big orange Donnie boy. No matter what he does, he's perfect. Even if he flip-flops every single day, just flip-flops. Liberation. It lasted.
This clown J.D. Vance called the Chinese peasants or some racist ass shit like that, bro. That shit's so disgusting. Even sitting there sleeping with that Indian lady. That's disgusting, man. That's another reason why China pissed. J.D. Vance, disrespectful ass, called the Chinese peasants. See, that's the arrogance of these bastards. That's the arrogance. They want to see the Chinese as peasants. Man, the Chinese done rose back up. A nation 5,000 years worth of history. I doubt these babies, this baby nation to be disrespecting ancient civilizations like that.
7 days, and now he's folding in this trade war with China. I love that China called his bluff and is showing him for the fraud that he is. And you're going to just call that art of the deal. No held convictions. You think he cares about those manufacturing jobs. You think he cares about improving the lives of the middle class. Then you are the mark. You are why we are in this position in the first place. And you're just as weak as he is.
Yup. Liberation Day lasted only a week. Trump rolled out these tariffs with bombastic rhetoric about standing up to China, only to exempt critical industries like smartphones and electronics almost immediately. Why? As I said before, the US economy simply can't function without them. This isn't just a flip-flop, it's a complete collapse of the tough stance he promised. And as the speaker pointed out, China called his bluff, exposing how weak these policies really are when faced with economic reality. Tariffs were supposed to bring jobs back to the US, but instead, they've shown just how reliant America still is on China. If anything, this whole saga proves that Trump doesn't have a real plan for decoupling. He's just making it up as he goes along. So there you have it. Trump's tariff strategy isn't just falling apart, it's exposing the cracks in his entire approach to trade and China. From flip-flopping on exemptions to alienating allies to emboldening Beijing, these policies are proven to be more damaging than decisive. The real question is, who's actually winning here? Because it's not America. China continues to...
China's up one. China up one. Nothing right now. But I know what they never thought was going to happen was for the Chinese to expose the... Just look at the luxury brand scam. A lot of black people should be ashamed of their goddamn selves anyway. You know, some people always said China was making knockoff products, right? China got knockoff products of fake Gucci's, fake Burberry, fake Jordans. All that, y'all know y'all heard that. But what China just exposed right now is it don't matter if you buy it from the Gucci store, you buy it for France, or if you go to Spain to get it, or if you go to a certain place, they're still making it in China. They just shipping it to those places. The big finesse, China exposed these people, and this is the we gotta do videos and lives all about this finesse right here. People been wearing fake knockoff Gucci from the corner store, and they got the same Gucci on them clowns bought at the Gucci store.
Do you recognize this style, this tag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton, you name it. But for this, I'm not proud because we were only making our wages. The profit margin for the people who are actually making the bags.
If I see any of y'all say I paid full price for a Louis, Gucci, Prada, Versace, any of that is made in China, I'ma laugh at you. Yep. Because I just found out that all are the same. If you got your Gucci from DHgate, it's the same Gucci in the stores. It just got a label. Y'all ain't doing nothing but paying for a label. You label.
Going down the DHgate rabbit hole, especially with all the tariffs going on.
That just don't let that go over your head. These people, because the black community, a lot of people have that arrogance. They think they're better than other people if they got this label on certain shit. You pay for that label. But people who didn't want the label just bought it out the swap meet. They got the same type of shit. Chinese is exposing it. Well, we made it all. We just put a label on it and shipped it to the luxurious places. And then we didn't put the label on it and shipped it. But, you know, it's the same shit coming from the same place.
Seeing the ungodly amount of money I've spent on designer over the years has me pissed. As a former sneakerhead, I guess maybe I still am, but we used to look down on people that would buy DHgate shoes because they're not real and you could only wear real shoes. And then getting into designer where I've bought so much Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, all of these big brands that we kind of look down on people that will buy fake, what we consider fake from DHgate. And now to find out that stuff is the same stuff that I could have been buying for $100, but I spent $2,000 on it. This makes me sick. I knew I should have put that money into an investment property or something to make me money, but I just wanted to stunt.
So now we know why America really didn't want us to see what they was doing over in China. And if you don't know, click the search bar and see how China just exposed America. That designer that you've been spending your money on, $200, $300, $400, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. All of your hard-earned money basically been going to knockoffs, if that's what y'all want to call them.
Baby, I'm over here screaming. Ignore this. I just got a shower. China is eating our asses up. They're actually, baby, they're eating everybody up. That motherfucker said, "Step into the light, Caroline." Them bags ain't being made in Italy. They're being made right here in China, being repackaged in Italy, and they're putting that little stamp, made in Italy. He said, does the quality change if you saw made in China?
Welcome, Gracie here once again. Welcome back to the channel. I hope that from wherever you, my lovelies, are watching this from, you're doing all right and God has protected you and preserved you very well. I do appreciate all of you that keep supporting, and shout out to my members for supporting exclusively through the member packs. And we are definitely back with another interesting episode. This is a familiar one, especially if you are and you have been following what has been happening between the US and China. They've been going back and forth at each other with different tariffs. But what it looks like right now, it looks like China manufacturers are exposing all these big brands. Yo Gucci, yo Chanel, yo Louis Vuitton. Every big brand that people have been buying all these expensive bags, shoes, and all of that, right? Yeah, China manufacturers are exposing that these things are actually made in China. And if you've been buying them for tens of thousands, and yeah, they're telling them, come and buy them at 100. This is gonna be a good one. I've compiled quite a lot of stitches for you guys to look at. Black people reacting. I'm gonna show you some videos, some stitches of Chinese actually talking about and exposing big brands. And also I'll bring you the reactions of Black people on this. Let me know what you think in the comment section about this very episode, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're watching for your very first time. Let's look at these stitches together.
Do you recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been the OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton, you name it. But for this, I am not proud because we were only making our wages. The profit margin for the people who are actually making the bags are very low. What I'm really proud of is that first, we have the best quality control. Two, we have the best craftsmanship. Chinese craftsmen are always intelligent and diligent. Three, we have the most complete supply chain. We always get what we want, like zippers, accessories of any kind, any color, and leathers immediately. Now, as the USA and its little European brothers are trying to refuse Chinese goods, don't you think luxury brands are not trying to move their OEM out of China? Yes, they did, but they failed because the OEM factories out of China, they don't have good quality control and they don't have as good craftsmanship. Their workers are either too expensive or too lazy. Three, they don't have any supply chain. They always have trouble getting leather or zippers or any accessories. That is why they failed, and that is why we will always be the best OEM factory for luxury brands. Why don't you just contact us and buy from us? You won't believe the prices we give you.
Who are the suppliers behind Lululemon? Some of their yoga wears are actually from Xianglong Clothing and Hongqisheng Clothing. And guess what? Both factories located in Yiwu here. And these two factories also supply clothing for Fila and Under Armour. I guess most of you know the price of Lululemon or other big brands. They sell you a legging pants for $100. And guess what? Here in these two factories, you can get them for around $5 to $6. Crazy. And what's even better? The material and the craftsmanship are basically the same because they all come the same production line. See, this is why people come to China and looking for the OEM factory, because they just can get the cheapest and best quality product from there and sell you, I don't know how much. All right, guys, if you want to know more about Lululemon or any other active wear brands, leave your message in the comment section. I'm Luna, your reliable sourcing partner. Do you know who is producing high quality accessories for those luxury brands like Chanel, Estée Lauder, L'Oreal? You're saying you're the supplier behind all these beauty accessories for those big luxury brands? L'Oreal, MAC, Chanel, Bobbi Brown, and even Rosewood Hotel.
Last week, we also received an order was then. Yeah, the comb like 20,000.
The comb,
one color.
Now show me your factory. Show me the production line.
Here, this is our cutting room. So you can see the machine. Here's color clip and the hair comb here. After the cutting, we can take the color clip out like this. Here's our molding area. Take off the plate. After make the mold, mold the shape so we can upsell include the spring and the flower accessories.
This is like the final touch up. You have to polish and polish like the
defective.
Quality control.
Here's our coating plate. On the surface, we will spray a drawing effect. Here's our painting plate. Here is one of our warehouse. Here is our material area. All the acid board we have ordered here.
This is devastating consumer confidence in the black community right now, because a lot of black channels is talking about this shit. They feel they got finessed, and they absolutely did.
I mean, what is this? This is like PVC or acrylic?
Acetate material. The material is eco-friendly and more durable and flexible than PVC or acrylic materials.
Oh.
It's the most expensive material.
How expensive?
For this one, for example, this one like 50 RMB one piece.
One piece, 50
Yeah,
RMB.
50 RMB. And
That's the cost of it.
Yeah.
China has gone full-blown Kendrick Lamar when it comes to this trade war. I love it. See, the president thought he was doing something by raising these tariffs. He thought he was really convincing people that China wasn't coming to the table. But in reality, he's been behind closed doors calling them over and over, trying to get some sort of deal done. And they haven't been answering him. In response to all of his nonsense, they've been making TikToks that have been flooding everybody's For You page, mine included, exposing all of the luxury brands that are made in China, exposing everything that's made in China. And not only that, to do one better, they are telling people you can buy it straight from the factory.
They come to the plug.
On top of that, I've been getting the dude who does the Trump impression all over my social media too. I love that dude. Plus, I don't know about y'all, but I done went and reopened my Red Note account because I'm trying to learn the language again. For the record, the next time I get a Trumper or a MAGA person in my comments who says, if you like China so much, why don't you go there? If you like China so much, why don't you go there? I'm going to go. Do not threaten me with a good time, all right? Because they got it all figured out. I know the president is doing this by accident, but somehow just his presence alone is strengthening the relationship between American citizens and Chinese citizens. They keep trying to make this country the boogeyman, and they fail every single time. It's hilarious. Hey man, Mr. President, go ahead and call off all them tariffs, man. You ain't got it. You ain't got another diss track in you, okay? It's over.
Who are the suppliers behind Salomon, Timberland, New Balance, Adidas, Nike, la, 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 la. First, Baozhong Factory, one of the world's largest OEM sports shoe manufacturer. It is like a Foxconn in the shoemaking industry. During its heyday, it has over 100,000 employees in just one of its factories in Dongguan. What even surprised me is that it owns an independent brand called YY Sports. It's like a distributor for sports shoes like Nike and Adidas, same as like Locker in America and JD Sports in England.
That's
So I'm guessing it's
like in the streets when you in the game and you selling drugs. In the U.S., they was the big drug dealers. What they did was they taught China how to cook cocaine, something you don't do. If you want to be the man, you got to get it from me. All right, we gonna cook it. Yeah, we selling to you hard. Now China got the game. They got the whip game now. And they letting the whole world know, we the ones making that good crack now. Not the U.S. showed China the game on manufacturing because they wanted them to be their peasants and make all that shit. Them people know how to make all of that shit from around. They showed them how to make it, shipped all of our factories over there, thinking that them people was going to make it for cheap. They did. But what you forgot is now they know how to make it. Now this day has come. They don't need you no more. They can make every fucking thing better and faster.
it's safe to say that China is currently winning this trade war. And all y'all motherfuckers that be on here when I was talking about reps and retail are the same fucking thing because they're coming from the same fucking place out there in China. Y'all thought I was crazy. Y'all said I was making shit up. See all those fake talking points that we've been using since the Cold War, about child labor, sweat. They don't do that shit. That's not how that shit work over there. It's not. But, good old American propaganda, American exceptionalism. We just think we're the best over here. The whole time, we really the ones living in sweatshop. And it all got exposed to the average American when they did this TikTok shutdown. And everybody flocked to Red App, and we saw how bad we were living in poverty over here. They got high-speed rails, affordable clothes, affordable fucking food. You know what I'm saying? The affordable housing. Whole time, we over here struggling in the slums. Then we over here going band for band on this trade shit. And we losing. Because they've been doing it. They've been preparing for this moment for decades, bro. They've been aligning themselves with the global South to replace our American consumerism so they could take the brunt of this bullshit, and it's working. They're literally flying goods into Vietnam in order to avoid the tariffs because and they're getting their goods brought into Vietnam and then flying them from there to China to avoid some of that tariff shit. They have the logistical supply chain and manufacturing means to take the brunt of this shit and come out on the positive end of what we can know. So America's been, bullying people for the longest. It's not working right now. Then look what they did with I Show Speed. That's how they're getting the younger generation to see like, okay, we're not that bad. They got I Show Speed to come out there to China and basically give them free promotion for like about 10 days. I think he used that 10-day visa-free shopping thing that they're offering, people to come out there and just buy stuff and see China. So we're losing socially, we're losing culturally, we're losing economically. The last thing that you can do is go to war. I'm telling you, it's coming, bro. They've literally like eradicated poverty, damn. I think 90% of their population is in the middle class. But then you got Americans that'll say like, oh, well, middle class for them is like $15,000 a year. Yeah, but when their rent is like $200, you know what I'm saying? Their food is like $1. Like, what are we really doing here? You know what I'm saying? They can live a comfortable middle class life on $17,000 to $43,000 out there. Meanwhile, you got people in America making well over 6 figures and live paycheck to paycheck. See, but that's what happens when you have unchecked capitalism and you allow corporate entities and CEOs to take over and, basically suck everything dry from the middle class, aka Reagan. This is when all it started, Reagan. Meanwhile, in China, their focus is the people. This is not vouching for them or any of that. It's just noticing the stark difference in between letting corporate greed and the dollar run a country versus people who care and understand the importance of supporting the people to get what you want.
They probably should have took this app away when they had the chance, because the Chinese manufacturers just hit them folks with the Uno reverse. And right now, the Chinese manufacturers are the best content on TikTok. They said, oh, tariffs, you say. Oh, okay. American people, y'all said y'all like New Balance, Adidas, Nike. Bet. Oh, yeah. The manufacturer is such and such, located at such and such in Guangzhou. They do shipping within this time. And here are the products. I've seen the manufacturers for every brand anybody could possibly think of, from shoes and apparel to beauty products. One of the Chinese manufacturers said, oh yeah, you know how you pay.
And you know the crazy part? If anybody go back and buy that shit from those people, then they love to be finessed, and it's a mental thing. They just want to feel like they better than somebody else. If they go and spend any money after this has been exposed, they some suckers and they deserve to be finessed.
Hey, such and such $100 for Chanel beauty products. Well, we only make them for $10. Listen, I don't know how this tariff thing is going to play out, but the way that the Chinese manufacturers are playing their hand, absolutely well done. 10s across the board. I told y'all in the years that I lived in China, I got everything under the sun because everything is pretty much made there. So to see people learning about the actual quality that's in China, because not everything is made cheaply, and learning about websites like Taobao, y'all better get to getting while the getting is good.
I know America really didn't think they were going to use America gaslighting techniques in order to force China into a deal. That white woman really got up here and said, well, if you guys don't make a deal with America, you're going to lose a customer. That Chinese man said, ma'am, China's been here for 5,000 years. Most of that time, America was not here. There's a few people, no matter what you do, you're just not going to gaslight them. That is old Africans. That is old Latinos. And that's old Chinese folks. You ain't about to move these people. And I never say this, but that man clocked that shit. That man clocked the hell out of that woman. He said, we don't need you. And then just to spit in your face, they then said, America, we don't have nothing from America. We don't own no American stuff. But Americans, if you want to come down here and shop, it's wide open. No charge to you. Just come and shop. You have to understand Chinese people are just different. These people don't need to fight with these because they use this. These are the type of people that go to school year round. And that don't mean smarter. No, that just means they're different. they crash out over getting A minuses. We're different kind of people. We have grown-ups in America on preschool level reading. We had a program in America said no kid left behind because so many kids were left behind. We're different.
Have y'all seen the TikToks that China is putting out about all the secrets on how luxury items are made, and they're just slapping the names on it? Y'all, if you have not seen the TikToks that China is putting out about the things that are being manufactured in China and brought over to the United States of America, you should go and check it out. You should go and check it out. Trump, you should have left them alone. You should have left them the fuck alone. This is the fuck around and find out stage. They are through and they are spilling all the beans. Oh my God. Chanel handbags. Chanel handbags. Cosmetics.
Rappers. All these rappers.
Skims.
Been getting finessed.
Y'all are done. Done.
Going down the DH gate rabbit hole, especially with all the tariffs going on, and seeing the ungodly amount of money I've spent on designer over the years has me pissed. As a former sneakerhead, I guess maybe I still am, but we used to look down on people that would buy DH gate shoes because they're not real and you could only wear real shoes. And then getting into designer, where I've bought so much Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, all of these big brands, that we kind of look down on people that will buy fake, what we consider fake from DH gate. And now to find out that stuff is the same stuff that I could have been buying for $100, but I spent $2,000 on it. This makes me sick. I knew I should have put that money into an investment property or something to make me money, but I just wanted to stunt. Now I'm going to be living by what I tell my clients to not worry about designer. Put that money into real estate.
So now we know why America really didn't want us to see what they was doing over in China. And if you don't know, click the search bar and see how China just exposed America. That designer that you've been spending your money on, $200, $300, $400, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, all of your hard-earned money basically been going to knockoffs, if that's what y'all want to call them, Canal Street specials, if I might say. China is basically saying that your favorite designer gets their bags, their clothes, their shoes made in China, not Italy. So when you thinking you getting the finest of threads, you getting them from China. And now China is saying that they got them for the low, like they been had them, but they just not keeping it secret no more. So what they're saying is that designer that we've been wearing, they've been making, and they make them for cheaper, and we might as well not buy that designer that we've been buying. It's kind of strange to me because a lot of people been losing their lives to get designer. It's a lot of people that lost their lives over designer. And you're telling me that China's been making it? All I can say is this trade war is exposing the real from the fake and the fake from the real. If that makes sense. I'm out.
I love what China doing. Keep on exposing these big brands. I just saw a video of this lady saying that, yeah, Lululemon, those leggings that y'all are paying $100 for, $5, $6 over there. Like, they so petty because now the suppliers are saying, hey, y'all can just come to us directly. You ain't even got to do all that. Don't go to Alibaba. You come right to us. And those wedding bands that y'all are paying thousands of dollars for, you can get that same wedding band for $2. And he really think he doing something with these tariffs. Like, you ain't doing nothing but just exposing yourself and exposing this country. Like, this back and forth mess that he's doing, he's just causing such a big mess. And you can tell that they're getting scared now because now all of a sudden they are saying, hey, well, you know what? It's not going to be on electronics anymore. Not on the electronics, because they saw that Apple went over there and took them phones and flew them back over here. They said, oh, not us. I hope that this is the end of the whole knockoffs conversation. Like, it's all coming from the same production line.
If I see any of y'all say I paid full price for a Louis, Gucci, Prada, Versace, any of that shit that is made in China, I'ma laugh at you. Yep. Because I just found out that all them hoes are the same. If you got your Gucci from DHgate, bitch, it's the same Gucci in the stores. It just got a label. Y'all ain't doing nothing but paying for a label. You label whores are about to be so pressed and so mad because y'all are not actually buying anything worth of substance. Y'all buying the same shit that we buy on DHgate, which I ain't never bought anything from DHgate, but now I am. I'm going to go get me a Gucci purse from DHgate because I didn't know that was the same thing. But China just got on this goddamn platform and said, you're basically buying the same thing. The only thing you're actually really paying for is the label. We are all producing these mass productions in the same fucking place. Bruh. Jordans too. Get all your shit from DHgate. It's all the same now.
Don't get it.
The way China is spilling the beans on these luxury brands, okay? But the DH girls try to tell y'all. They try to tell y'all, okay? It's the same damn thing. They are tied and through. I get it. Listen, I don't really care for these luxury brands. Y'all will be all right because people still going to be goofy and buy y'all stuff anyway. So it really doesn't matter. But it just shows how the stuff is not worth it. Those products are not worth the price. But we knew this, though. The only thing is that China has always kept it cute. Okay? People find out, but China was like, listen, we want them orders. We want them coins. We're going to keep it cute. But now, because Mr. Man want to play with the tariffs, oh, yeah, they spilling the beans, honey. Chanel, all these cosmetic brands. Have y'all been to Sephora lately? Foundation is like $80. But is it really? Okay. Yeah, they're spilling the beans and I'm here for it. And if you want to be goofy and spend all that money, that's on you. That is on you. But baby, it's not worth it. It's not. Okay. Thank you.
Are y'all noticing all the China content that's been coming out? Literally all day today on my timeline, it's been nothing but China. I've learned so much about China in the past 24 hours. It's not even funny. Pretty interesting after the fact that they said that the TikTok deal was completely off the table with the US. I've been seeing the top most beautiful places in China. I've been seeing all their cars. I've been seeing all their cell phones, how their cities all operate. I've seen their high-speed rail system today. I've seen they even trying to sell us pods to drop ship on any place we want them for $10,000. I also see that they're hyping up the TikTok shop again all of a sudden. It's almost like a light switch went off and my content went from all political and Black activism to straight up China. I was just wondering if y'all are getting the same thing on your FYP now, or if it's just me, or did you even notice it? Because I know I sure the hell did.
How to ship goods from China to the US is very simple. You can log into GoNest to obtain your warehouse address in China. Just instruct your supplier to ship the goods to the address. Next, we will inspect the goods, handle custom duties, and provide door-to-door delivery service from China to anywhere in the world.
Well, I'll be damned.
First, the Birkins being sold on live. Now they're giving tutorials on how to get your stuff shipped from China straight to your door, babes.
Do you recognize this style, this bag? Of course you do. For the past more than 30 years, we have been OEM factory for most of the luxury brands around the world. Gucci, Prada, Coach, Louis Vuitton, you name it. But for this, I'm not proud because we were only making our wages. The profit margin for the people who are actually making the bags are very low.
I was just watching Becca Bloom's video saying how her Hermes bag collection appreciates in value faster than a lot of finance bros portfolios do. And like slay, of course. But seeing how Chinese original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, are now spilling the beans about how a lot of these luxury purses are manufactured like 90% in China and then shipped off to like France and Italy to get their kind of finishing touches so that they can stamp made in France or made in Italy or made in, Portugal, Spain, etc. on the bags and mark them up by like 1,000%. As we're headed into a recession, people are kind of like locking up their purses, their pocketbook. And now that we have the knowledge that the difference between spending hundreds of dollars and tens of thousands of dollars on a bag is simply a stamp and repackaging, and the West's successful alienation of Chinese manufacturing by hammering it into our brains that made in China means like cheap and will fall apart quickly. Dupe culture was already running rampant. With this knowledge and OEMs being transparent about the kind of quality they can offer and telling you you can buy from us directly, is the luxury handbag market fucked?
Baby, I'm over here screaming. Ignore this. I just got a shower. China is eating our asses up. They're actually, baby, they're eating everybody up. That motherfucker said, step into the light, Caroline. Them bags ain't being made in Italy. They're being made right here in China, being repackaged in Italy, and they're putting that little stamp, made in Italy. He said, does the quality change if you saw made in China? He said, how would you feel if you found out it was made in China? He said, come to me and get the product. China said, y'all gonna go low, we're gonna drive y'all to hell. Baby, I just want y'all to know, if y'all see my sisters with some Birkins, they the real Birkins, we went straight to China. Hey, I mean, if I could get them a Birkin for $200, $300, and it's the real spill deal, I don't mind that motherfucker saying made in China. I hope they don't either, bitch. It's gonna be a Merry, Merry Christmas around here. I'm going straight to the dealer. What? Baby, they done cut the middleman. This is just like the plug. I ain't got to go to the store no more. I can go to the dealer himself. China. Any Chinese person that see this, that got them, that they was calling replicas, go ahead, hit the DM. Hit the D and the M. I'm proud of y'all. I'm proud of y'all for standing on motherfucking business, and I love waking up to the bullshit. I just love it. China, do your thing, baby. Show out and show up, okay? Now, my sister might not get no Birkins because I don't even care for no shit like that, but yeah, I want some shit. Listen, China, I'm here. I stand. Let's go. Let's ride, baby.
China. I did not know Chinese people could be this petty. I see Chinese people and I'm like, they're very cutesy, they're very demure, they're very mindful. But Uncle Trump, you have pressed the wrong button. I don't know what you have done. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so this is a novice ass. I have no idea. This is me watching from TikTok. But I don't know what's going on at the moment. But one thing for sure, I am loving the way Chinese people are being petty. I did not know you guys could be this petty. Look, I don't know if you guys have stumbled across China FYP or Chinese FYP, this war going on between China and America at the moment. I am loving it. I'm loving the way they're spilling all the beans. Chinese people are spilling a lot. Don't come for my British ass. Actually, I'm not British. I'm Nigerian. Don't come for my Nigerian ass. I am just a resident in the UK. But I promise you, when it comes to this case, I'm Nigerian. Don't come to England, though. Please don't, because we're not that strong. We are not that strong in England. We are not. We don't fight. We're very polite. We're very kind. We're very cutesy. We're very mindful. We don't fight. Like, we just go, you're right, Alan. Hi. Like, we're very mindful here. Don't come for us, please. But I am loving all the pettiness. I did not know Chinese people have... Guys, have you come across all these videos? They are spilling everything. China, 0. America, minus 0.0000000. Because I'm loving it. I'm here for it. I'm loving it.
Oh, I just know that the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills are going to be punching the air on Rodeo Drive when they see the regular housewives walking around with the same Birkin bags as they have. China really said the Orange Menace wants to start a trade war and drag Europe into it. Bet. How much of your capitalism relies on us to survive?
Yeah, I want you guys to, of course, put your thoughts in the comment section. I think these were the most hilarious responses that I have seen, towards these tariffs, towards these two elephants that are fighting. I have a saying reserved for you, probably at the end of this video or in the middle. It comes from Uganda specifically, and you guys will love it because it really, it just explains the situation that is happening right now. Now, for our people that have been made to feel bad because you're buying all these things from Shein and all of that, and they say you're wearing Shein dresses and all of that, how does it feel to know that Actually, it's the same thing. It's just the brand. Yeah, it's just the logo that the other people have been buying and spending thousands and thousands and hundreds and millions of dollars. I think this really opens our eyes to see the problem that is with our society that we are living in today. Consumerism is a huge thing, and I think it has been esteemed beyond how it was supposed to be. Literally, everyone wants to show how big they are, right? And then mock those that can't afford what they have. And it's so crazy because I feel like the so-called people that have been, wearing brands and all of that, they're about to lose it because China manufacturers just put them in the same box and they're like, we make this, right? And for so little. Now, for the people that were saying, this is a reverse UNOM, China is really winning this war and all of that, I understand the feelings. At this point, I feel like there are people that are eager and waiting to just see US failing because technically they just don't like Trump because they feel like he's really, really just not a good president anyway because of the things he's doing.
Things that we need.
So Donald Trump's trade war with the rest of the world continues, and his Commerce Secretary Lutnick had some thoughts on it. I want to play some of the interview, and let's just jump right in.
Big tariffs on things like smartphones and laptops, iPhones, all those iPhones built in China. That those tariffs are temporarily off, but they're going to be coming right back on in another form in a month or so? Or what are you saying?
Correct. That's right. That's right. Semiconductors and pharmaceuticals will have a tariff model in order to encourage them to reshore, to be built in America. We need our medicines and we need semiconductors and our electronics to be built in America. We can't be beholden and rely upon foreign countries for fundamental things that we need. We can't be relying on China for fundamental things that we need, our medicines.
Okay, so let's try to break this stuff down. First, this was the headline that caught my attention, so I looked up the interview. It says, U.S. tech tariff exemption will be temporary, says Lutnick. So basically, Trump was raising tariffs around the world. You guys know this. Then he did a 90-day pause and said on all the rest of the countries, we're going to have a 10% tariff across the board, except for China. We're going to have a 145% tariff on China, but then we're going to have some exemptions in some categories, which was a lot of it was tech-related, semiconductors, et cetera. I know this stuff gets confusing. And then the question basically boils down to, are we going to make iPhones in USA? Is that our end goal? And then Lutnick's answer is, well, certain industries and certain things we have to make in USA for national security. It was really a convoluted answer. And then they kept saying that, maybe the tariffs will be back on in a month. And basically sort of how I read this is just what I want to talk with you about. The Trump people all along want to enrich themselves, okay? And essentially, if whatever companies come in and bribe Trump, give him $1 million to have dinner, whatever, put a bunch of money in their campaign, I think that's what they're going for. And I think this is sort of why their answers always come a bit strange, because they're trying to cover up for the fact that they're really in it to enrich themselves. Have some more watch and you'll see what I'm saying here.
The president's made it clear he wants negotiations with China. Have you had any conversations with your Chinese counterpart? Has there been anything between you and the Chinese?
I think we've had soft, the way I would say it is soft entrees,
So first, after a really long pause, have you been talking to the Chinese, right? It's like, please don't ask me that. Then he has to come up with some sort of answer where he's saying soft entrees. What does it mean? So basically, they got nothing. Have a listen more of what they say, though.
through intermediaries and those kind of comments. But we all expect that the President of the United States and President Xi of China will work this out. I am completely confident, as is he, that this will be worked out in a positive, thoughtful, and effective way for the United States of America. I mean, Donald Trump has the ball. I want him to have it. He's the right person with it. He knows how to play this game. He knows how to deal with President Xi. This is the right person for the right role. And I am confident this is going to work out with China. Yes, is it in a tough spot now? Of course it is. But you'll see. All of that energy will sort of decline and we'll end up in a perfectly reasonable place with China. I'm confident of it.
So that's their answer. And I just want you to see it for yourself. The basic is, hey, are you talking to China? What's going on with negotiations? Long pause. We might be talking through some intermediaries. I don't think they got anything. It doesn't seem like it. And their other answer is, as they always try to come up with, is, well, Trump's a really good businessman and just put your trust in Trump. And it's pretty poor answers, to be very frank. This is sort of why I'm going over what's actually happening. This was just reported now at the same time in the interview. China halts critical exports as trade war intensifies. So basically, at any moment, China can just stop sending the USA stuff. That's what it boils down to. So I'm not against reshoring jobs in USA or diversifying our supply chains. I think that's a good thing, right? But the problem is the way the Trump people are doing it is haphazard. It doesn't seem like they have any semblance of a plan, and I guess that's their language, right? Semblance of plan or concepts of a plan. They're just looking out to enrich themselves, and which I'll go over in a moment here. But this is also part of what you have to understand the world that we live in. It says until 2023, China produced 99% of the world's supply of heavy earth metals, with a trickle of production coming out of the refinery in Vietnam. But that refinery has been closed for the past year because of tax dispute, leaving China with a monopoly. And so effectively, right, China is got a large, resources, these rare earth minerals that the world needs. The USA needs this stuff. And it's kind of ineffective to do this trade policy in a way where we're insulting them, et cetera. And in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, the USA should be working really hard to develop stronger relationships in Southeast Asia. I think that would be a really good thing. But, for the Trump point of view, who's the country he meets with first? Israel. Where's the country that he visits first? Saudi Arabia. That's his focus. And again, if you guys don't know with the Saudi Arabia situation, the first time they did the tariffs, Trump's like, hey, I'm going to go do my golf tournament thing with the Saudis. That's literally what they're up to. So he's just in it for enriching himself. And then you can see here, this was the news today. China has suspended exports of a wide range of critical minerals and magnets, threatening to choke off supplies of components central to automakers, aerospace manufacturers, semiconductor companies, and military contractors around the world. So that's sort of where we're at. And then you have this problem too, where Vance is insulting Chinese. You can watch this.
We borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America.
Did the vice president go off message there? I mean, he's calling the Chinese peasants. This is something that we heard the Chinese say was ignorant and disrespectful. I mean, I haven't heard Donald Trump talk that way about the Chinese.
No, I'm just going to step back and really just leave the vice president to let him defend himself. He knows what he meant, and we all know what he meant.
So Lutnick's at least smart enough to I'm not touching that. I'm not defending the vice president. I'm not touching that. So, I mean, this is just pretty frank, a disaster. I don't know where this is going to end. Again, China has the power over the USA. Their strategy is just trust in Donald Trump. He's so great at this stuff. Trump's strategy is, hey, I'm going to make myself rich and go meet with the Saudis. I'm just telling you guys what's up. They're going to make the case that Trump's going to be bringing a whole bunch of jobs to the USA, manufacturing. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. Let me play some of it, and just so you can see for yourself what we're talking about here.
The president also said there's going to be a transition cost, transition problems. I mean, we are going to see higher prices in America as well. It's not like you can open a factory tomorrow to build iPhones or to make sneakers, shoes. I mean, we buy a lot of shoes in this country. 99% of them are made elsewhere. I mean, are we going to become nation of cobblers again? I mean, what? This is going to mean higher prices, isn't it?
And that's a legitimate question. It's a question that I thought of immediately when we started slapping tariffs on Vietnam. So, okay, is that our goal? Is to, bring clothing manufacturing to the USA? These kind of things. The answer that Ludness is going to say, oh, we're going to bring manufacturing jobs and high tech, et cetera. So listen to what he says. You'll see. So basically, he dodges the kind of Nike question, basically.
I mean, have you seen, I don't necessarily think so. I think the idea is that we can manufacture here in America. As I said, I saw Panasonic, the battery company, right? Japanese company. They built an amazing factory in Kansas, which they're opening now. They put it in the ground when Donald Trump was the president. It's just finishing now. 4,000 new jobs built from what they made deals with the community colleges nearby and all the local community and the local university.
So I'm not against battery factories in USA. I just want to make that clear. I'm not against that. But the stuff that he's talking about is a little bit of smoke and mirrors because you're still going to have to get the materials from somewhere, right? So that's important. And then, as we just talked about, China's cutting off, basically magnets and things that we need. You can get it from other countries, but that's where you need to have relationships. This is actually Panasonic here. It says is hiring for the DeSoto plant, hopes to be ready for production this spring. That's in January. But there's been some discussion on what's actually happening with this plant. Trump is looking at cutting essentially government support for this kind of plant. This literally just came out in February. Are billions in federal EV incentives for Panasonic plant in limbo? And this is where it ends up being smoke and mirrors, right? Donald Trump's EV tax credit take back could undermine Panasonic's Kansas plant. This is a very, very thorny and tricky issue because the Trump people, they tend to be against green energy or anything kind of new technology. Yet they've also partnered with Elon Musk, who would want these EV credits, right? It's like I said, it's a thorny issue. The Republicans tend to want to be on the more side of oil and these kind of things. And this is sort of where they're talking about high tech jobs, yet their policies doesn't really support said jobs, and it ends up being smoke and mirrors. And so this stuff is in limbo. So that's what I want to point out to you. And then the stuff that they do talk about, this would be the Trump people where he's signing an order, is shower heads. Watch this. You'll see what I'm saying. And you'll see Lutnick in the background. Watch him laugh. You'll see.
Administration launched what you've called a war on showers. They had certain regulations that basically killed the water pressure of showers and other water appliances.
You can say it. Go ahead. What are the appliances?
I mean, it's everything, sir.
Sinks and toilets.
Dishwashers, toilets, sinks. But the shower heads are.
There's no water. You don't get water. It's ridiculous.
So with this executive order, we're effectively going to be reversing that set of regulations to ensure that Americans have choice in the consumer market. If they want a low flow shower head, they can buy one. If they want a real deal shower head, they should have it.
That's true. You buy a new house, you pay a lot of money, and
See, they're literally all laughing. And I'll let you guys read what the laughing means. Are they laughing because they know this whole thing is stupid? Why are they laughing? I mean, a lot of stuff is a joke. I know it's really frustrating. I just wanted to go through kind of the stuff that they're saying, because a lot of times a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, or even when they show who they really are, like they're laughing because why are we, in my opinion, why are we wasting time on executive orders on shower heads and then we're talking about showers? That's their priority. It is laughable because it's so stupid. But that's what they're up to. Watch a little bit more and you can see this Lutnick is just laughing his butt off, as you can see.
developers, you're not allowed to do anything more. They put restrictors on. They used to have a restrictor where you could take it out, but now they weld it in. And you take a shower or wash your hands, whatever you do, including dishwashers when no water comes out. But you wash your hands, and in my case, I like to take a nice shower to take care of my beautiful hair. Stand under the shower for 15 minutes till it gets wet. It comes out drip, drip, drip. It's ridiculous.
So I guess if you work for Trump, you got to laugh at his jokes. And when we talk about, I'm going to make it so showers are great again, so I can have beautiful hair. That's where we are. That's what's going on with the tariffs. Want to hear your thoughts on this. And I'll catch you on the
iPhones for Hello, 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。The Trump administration has started caving to pressure from American big tech, attempting to quietly and without fanfare remove a long list of goods from its tariff list, effectively making around 30% of Chinese exports to the US tariff-free. The list includes smartphones, laptops, computers, semiconductors, and solar cells, which the US spends around $120 billion importing from China each year. This comes after Trump was forced to pause his tariffs around the world for 90 days, excluding China, of course, who refused to play his games and instead put up a show of force, effectively beating Trump at his own game. Today, we'll go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. China has made zero concessions, no phone call, Trump folds, worst poker player ever. That is just one comment of thousands underneath US mainstream media YouTube videos announcing Trump's cancelling of tariffs against a huge list of tech products imported from China. Late Friday evening local time, a notice on the US Customs and Border Patrol website stated that a long list of electronics, including smartphones, laptops, computers, semiconductors, solar panels, flat panel TV displays, flash drives, memory cards, and solid-state drives from China will be exempt from the boorish 145% tariffs Trump leveled on them this week. But there was no fancy media event, no huge printed cards for dramatic effect. Instead, the Trump administration hoped those embarrassing but vital concessions to his poorly planned and poorly executed game of chicken would go unnoticed. That did not happen. It's estimated that the tariff reversals Trump undertook last night account for 28.5% of China's total exports to the US and are worth around $127 billion per year. While welcome news, this shows a complete failure on Trump's part. There's simply no other way to put it. And it highlights perfectly just how poorly coordinated Trump's tariff tantrums are, with different sectors of his own administration pushing completely different messaging. For example, just hours before Trump removed tariffs on electronics from China, White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt gushed, President Trump has made it clear America cannot rely on China to manufacture critical technologies such as semiconductors, chips, smartphones, and laptops. Maybe Trump should include Leavitt in more of his meetings to save future embarrassments like this one. And just days ago, Leavitt told reporters at the White House that Trump wants to manufacture Apple iPhones in the US, which led to massive trolling from Chinese netizens who knew, better than the Trump administration it seems, that that would never happen, making hilarious memes showing overweight Americans slaving away in sweatshops. Underneath a US mainstream media report on the tariff cancellations, one American YouTuber quipped, I guess American workers aren't going to be assembling iPhones for $7.25 an hour anytime soon. Another added, Trump just shattered the new American dream, screwing tiny screws into iPhones. And the harsh comments from ordinary Americans did not hold back. Trump's ego won't allow him to admit he made a mistake, one user noted. Another added, The Art of Starting a Trade War You Cannot Win by Donald J. Trump. Another user correctly stated, Trump made a tactical mistake running up against China. But even more hilarious is revisiting cocky American tweets from days ago, which have aged like fine milk. Check out this post from a self-described American finance expert with 2.1 million followers on Twitter. China has three options. 1, concede defeat to whatever terms Trump demands. 2, devalue the yuan by 20 to 40%. 3, unleash biggest fiscal stimulus in its history, which will push its debt off the chart. Hopefully not too many Twitter users took that guy's advice. But many Americans are pushing Trump to go even further, accusing him of favoring his billionaire friends in big tech and ignoring the massive damage these tariffs are doing to small and medium-sized businesses who rely on goods from China to stay afloat. One US netizen rightly asked, "So small business can go under, but big tech gets exemption?" Another added, "He wants to destroy the small to medium-sized business and protect his billionaire buddies." Yet another said, "Ask every farmer in the USA how they feel about giving tariff concessions to corporations and not them." Which is why I think the Trump administration will continue to cave in the days to come, especially as China's president still refuses to give him that long-awaited call. US farmers sold around $24 billion in agricultural goods to China last year alone. But with a 125% reciprocal tariff leveled by Beijing against American corn and soybeans, relief for Trump's core base is not likely at all, unless Trump himself continues to make concessions, removing the tariffs he should never leveled to begin with. Honestly, you guys, it's quite hilarious how some pundits in the United States truly believed that Trump was playing 4D chess with his Liberation Day tariffs. It's clearly evident that all he was playing was a childish, rudimentary game of chicken, and he swerved first. Before I let you guys go, I want to quickly remind you guys of the cockiness of US media pundits in the days following Trump's tariff announcements. Check out this gem from one buffoon at Fox News.
And now you're seeing what Trump's trying to do. He's trying to destroy China. Because if you break the Chinese economy, you put America back on top. Remember, the Chinese thought they were going to overtake us. It's not going to happen if this thing goes through. If you can cut off their exports, they're toast. You can't export all these cheap products here. You're definitely not going to sell them into Europe because they don't have the consumer power. And so the Chinese economy, they can't consume their own stuff because they don't have enough wealth and they don't have enough families, to be honest with you. And so you're going to have to lay people off, and then the whole country is going to disintegrate. So that's a good thing.
Wow, I wonder if that guy will keep his job after that massive brain fart. Wait, it's Fox News. Of course he will. And on that note, that
After threatening to impose tariffs on countries all around the world, US President Donald Trump has made it clear that there's really one country that is the main target of the very aggressive economic war that he's waging, and that country is China. The US government is obsessed with trying to weaken and contain China because they see China as the only country powerful enough to challenge the global dominance of the United States economically, technologically, militarily, and politically. And this is bipartisan. It's not just Donald Trump. The Democrats and Joe Biden also attempted it, but Trump has taken it to a whole new level and essentially declared a nuclear economic war on China. The US president announced on the 10th of April that he was pausing the tariffs that he threatened on other countries for 90 days. He did approve a blanket tariff of 10% on everyone, but that was already announced previously. However, he did announce something new and something big. He was continuing to impose tariffs of an additional 125% on China. And those 125% tariffs are in addition to the previous 20% tariffs that Trump put on China. That means that Trump has now imposed 145% tariffs on China, which honestly, it's more symbolic than anything. Economists estimate that after 50%, it doesn't really have that much of an impact to increase the tariffs to 70, 90, 140%, because after 50%, it's going to significantly decrease trade between the US and China. Because China has responded in self-defense to Trump's tariffs and hit back with tariffs on the US. And Trump originally claimed that his tariffs were so-called reciprocal, which is actually not true. They were unilateral and aggressive. China's tariffs are actually reciprocal. And the Chinese government spokesperson, Mao Ning, published a video of Mao Zedong, the famous revolutionary leader, back in the 1950s, in which China was supporting Korea in the Korean War when the US brutally bombed Korea and killed 20% of the North Korean population. And in this famous speech from Mao, he said that China is willing to fight until the end. China will never surrender. So Trump is trying to carry out the mission that warhawks in Washington have dreamed of for years, which is economic decoupling. Trump wants to end economic relations between the US and China. And this has been pushed by neoconservative think tanks like AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank, which is funded by large corporations, the military industrial complex, and conservative billionaires who also support Trump. And Trump is now carrying out this agenda, which is very likely going to be disastrous for the U.S. economy, given that the U.S. imports more goods from China than any other country. This is the very big and very risky gamble that the U.S. government is making, that it can win a trade war with China. And this was expressed by Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, the billionaire Howard Lutnick. On Fox News, he claimed that China is more dependent on the U.S. and the U.S. is dependent on China. And he insisted that the U.S. can win this economic game of chicken.
China chose the path of going against Donald Trump. I mean, he said, don't retaliate. If you retaliate, then you're going to feel my wrath. And that's what happened. But let's be clear. We are their biggest client by far, by far, by far. The American consumer buys everything from China. They can't afford to be without us.
Trump's billionaire Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, made very similar remarks. He claimed that China responding to Trump's tariffs by defending itself was a big mistake. And he said, quote, "We export 1/5 to them of what they export to us. So that is a losing hand for them, for China," he said. However, that's an absurd argument because it's not about just the number, the overall sum of trade. It's about what exactly the U.S. imports from China and what China imports from the U.S. If you look at their exports, you can see that what the U.S. largely exports to China is petroleum, oil. China can get oil from a lot of countries. Soybeans, which is the top U.S. export to China. China can buy soybeans from many other countries. Cars, well, China already produces some of the best cars in the world. Copper, China can find copper from somewhere else. And okay, the U.S. does, or it used to export integrated circuits, chips to China, but the U.S. government has been putting export restrictions on China, going not only back to Trump, but also to Biden. This was bipartisan. And China has been developing its own domestic chip industry. So it's actually quite easy for China to replace a lot of the imports it gets from the US. It can import those products from other countries. But then look at what the US imports from China. It's very different. The biggest export that China sends to the US is cell phones, which is included under broadcasting equipment. It's difficult to replace cell phones made in China. Where is Apple going to make its iPhone? They're trying to make it in India, but it's very difficult. The second biggest Chinese export to the US is computers. So in other words, what the entire modern economy relies on, where is the US going to get those computers from that it can't import from China anymore because there's now 140% tariff? They're over twice as expensive. The US also imports a lot of batteries from China, which are needed for electric vehicles, phones, computers. Pretty much everything today has an electric battery. How is the US going to replace those electric batteries? It would have to create an entire new supply chain, create new factories, find new companies who will invest in the US, train workers. It's going to take many years, if not decades, to recreate that supply chain without China. In the meantime, the US has no alternatives. So what this shows is that Trump administration officials are living in opposite land. It's actually the US which is much more dependent on China than vice versa. And if you don't believe me, well, this is what even mainstream prominent economists are warning, including Adam Posen, who previously worked for the US Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank. In an article in Foreign Affairs magazine, he warned that trade wars are easy to lose. He wrote that despite the Trump administration's claims to the contrary, quote, "It is China that has escalation dominance in this trade war. The United States gets vital goods from China that cannot be replaced anytime soon or made at home at anything less than prohibitive cost," end quote. He said that Trump's massive escalation of this trade war so quickly is, quote, "a recipe for almost certain defeat at enormous cost." Or to put it in Bessent's terms, Washington, not Beijing, is betting all in on a losing hand, end quote. The Financial Times published a long report that provides some very important insight into just how crucial China is in the global economy and in global supply chains. This FT report notes that Beijing's trade juggernaut is built on deep competitive advantages built up over decades that will not be easily dislodged. Quote, "The sheer scale of China's dominance is unprecedented. No other country in recent decades has matched this level." And it notes that China makes up around a third of all global manufacturing, more than the US, Japan, Germany, and South Korea combined. This article notes that China almost single-handedly runs the global lithium-ion battery industry. The US doesn't have alternatives to these very important batteries. Again, it would take years or decades to build its own domestic industry. And as the FT report put it, quote, "No other region globally provides the same unique combination of resources, advanced manufacturing capabilities, skilled labor, investment capital, and substantial government support for the battery industry," end quote. There is no alternative to China. The FT reported that China supplies at least 50% of global exports for 730 out of 5,000 classified trading products, 3 times higher than the EU and almost 8 times as many as the US. This is why, despite the fact that in 2018, Trump started the trade war against China, China's trade dominance continued to increase. And this is largely because China has been diversifying its trade partners. China is now the #1 trading partner of the majority of countries on Earth, including all countries in Africa, most countries in Latin America, and almost all countries in Asia. And China's dependence on exporting to the US market has been decreasing over time. In 2018, 19.2% of China's exports went to the US. As of 2024, it fell to 14.7% of China's exports. And now, with Trump's sky-high tariffs of well over 100%, this figure is going to fall close to zero, probably, if these tariffs continue in the long term. So the Trump administration is engaged in a very, very risky trade war that will likely backfire hard on the U.S. economy and cause significant damage, especially to average U.S. consumers, to average poor and working people in the U.S. They're going to see lots of inflation because the U.S. economy is so reliant on importing consumer goods from China, and those consumer goods are going to get a lot more expensive. And it's going to have ripple effects across the U.S. economy because as the disposable income of Americans falls, they will buy fewer products, which means that companies will lay off workers. And as more workers will get laid off, you have a feedback loop where they're not buying as many products. So other workers are laid off, and it could cause a recession and significant problems in the U.S. economy. And the Trump administration is significantly overstating its hand and risking a lot. And Trump's arrogance in all of this is really incredible. He boasted that after he threatened tariffs on countries around the world, more than 75 nations called the US, contacted US representatives, and asked for those tariffs to be removed or to be minimized. And at a fancy gala organized by the Republican Party, Trump boasted that other countries are, quote, kissing my ass, end quote, to end those tariffs.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir.
Now, the fact that Trump is saying things like that out loud in public is really troubling because other countries have access to the internet. They can see that Trump is demeaning other countries, making fun of them, spitting on them, treating them like they're children or animals. And this is going to only further incentivize other countries to seek alternatives to their economic reliance on exporting to the US market, because they can see that the US is run by this madman who is boasting that countries around the world are kissing his ass to try to bring down tariffs, using tariffs as a political weapon to force other countries to kiss the ring. And this really is the Trump administration strategy. This was spelled out by Trump's top economic advisor, Stephen Myron, who gave a speech that was published by the White House in which he said that the Trump administration is using the threat of tariffs to force other countries to make significant concessions to the United States to hurt their economies, to benefit the U.S., and to pay the U.S. empire to maintain its global financial and military system dominated by the U.S.
If other nations want to benefit from the U.S. geopolitical and financial umbrella, they need to pull their weight and pay their fair share. They could boost defense spending and procurement from the United States, buying more US-made goods. They can invest in and install factories in America. They won't face tariffs if they make their products in this country. They could simply write checks to Treasury. That would help us finance global public goods as well.
So essentially, what the Trump administration is trying to do is acting like a global mafia don, a global mafia boss, and ordering other countries to pay tribute to the U.S. emperor. Sorry for mixing metaphors here, but Trump's acting like the emperor of planet Earth and saying, you need to pay the U.S. tribute in order to maintain its global empire. And this is really why Trump has been so inconsistent in saying one thing and doing another and contradicting himself. You know, Trump supporters like to claim that he's playing 5D chess and he's a genius and he's making the best deals. And every time he does something contradictory or stupid, they say this is part of the master plan. But in reality, Trump is just acting like a mafioso. He's threatening everyone. He's using mafia-style tactics, demanding that they pay tribute. And this reminds me of a political cartoon that went viral on social media that shows a king with a crown, and he's shooting arrows randomly at the wall. And his servant is painting bullseyes around the arrows as if all of the arrows shot by the king were perfectly on the mark. Everything that he did is an example of his wisdom, of how great he is. This is how Trump supporters and conservative media outlets like Fox News are treating Trump. He's just engaging in all of these crazy tactics. And at the end of the day, it's not really part of some grand strategic bargain that he wants to pursue. It's really a simple strategy. He's pushing around other countries to try to maximize the power of the U.S. empire, threatening countries to force them to pay up to subsidize the United States so it can continue to maintain its global empire. However, the Trump administration is facing a major obstacle, which is the largest economy on earth, when you measure its GDP at purchasing power parity, is not the US, it's China. China is a major superpower, and it's defending itself. It's refusing to kiss the ring, and China has said clearly, quote, China will fight to the end if the US side is bent on going down the wrong path, end quote. And this is why the US is so angry, so furious, because it's trying to maintain a global empire with unipolar dominance of the entire planet. and China is standing in the way. This is why top US officials like Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, are publicly threatening China. This is why Trump announced that he's expanding the US military budget to $1 trillion to prepare for war with China. And Trump's extremely hawkish neoconservative defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, published a book called American Crusade, in which he said that the US is in a so-called holy war. That's the term he used, a holy war against China. And he called for overthrowing the Chinese government. This is the guy running the Pentagon right now. And this is also why Trump nominated the neoconservative war hawk Marco Rubio to oversee U.S. foreign policy as the Secretary of State. And in his Senate confirmation hearing, Rubio said very clearly that the new Cold War that the U.S. is waging against China will determine the entire 21st century, that when historians look back at the history of this century, other issues like Russia and Ukraine will be mere footnotes, insignificant compared to the U.S. new Cold War on China.
The Communist Party of China leads the PRC, is the most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. They have elements that the Soviet Union never possessed. They are a technological adversary and competitor, an industrial competitor, an economic competitor, a geopolitical competitor, a scientific competitor now, in every realm. It's an extraordinary challenge. It's one that I believe will define the 21st century. When they write the book about the 21st century, there's going to be some chapters in there about Putin. There's going to be some chapters in there about some of these other places. But the bulk of that book about the 21st century will be not just about China, but about the relationship between China and the United States and what direction it went.
Now, to be fair, this is not just policy of the Donald Trump administration. This is bipartisan policy in Washington. Democrats have also been very hawkish against China. And in the previous Biden administration, Biden's Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, said very clearly that the goal of the U.S. is to, quote, slow down China's rate of innovation, end quote. She also said that the U.S. government would do, quote, whatever it takes, end quote, to restrict China from getting access to the most high-tech technology, especially artificial intelligence, because the U.S. government wants to protect big tech monopolies in Silicon Valley. So again, this is bipartisan. It's Trump and Biden, Republicans and Democrats. However, Trump has taken the economic war and trade war and tech war against China to a whole new level. Trump started the trade war against China in 2018 during his first term as U.S. president. And Biden, when he came in 2021, he actually continued the trade war against China and the tech war. But Trump has kicked this trade war into hyperdrive. And like I have repeated, he has made this into a nuclear economic war against China, a massive game of chicken in which the U.S. is trying to destroy the Chinese economy, hoping that it doesn't destroy the U.S. economy first. And we're actually already seeing signs of that happening. If you look at what's going on in the U.S. bond market, this is very important for the U.S. government because if the yields on U.S. bonds go too high, it's going to make it very expensive for the U.S. government to continue to finance its debt. And it's not China, but actually Japan that is the largest holder of U.S. Treasury securities with over $1 trillion of U.S. Treasuries. And what exactly happened that forced Trump to take a step back and pause his tariff war? Well, Japan was reportedly selling a lot of its U.S. Treasury securities, which caused the 10-year yield to go up very significantly. And this was not reported by anti-Trump people in the media. This was reported by Trump supporters at Fox News. The Fox News correspondent, Charlie Gasparino, reported, citing money managers, that it was Japan, not China, that was selling its Treasury securities that upended the bond market, forcing Trump's hand into a pause. This is a very big issue for the U.S. government. In fact, if you remember back to the British conservative Prime Minister Liz Truss, she introduced a budget that was like Thatcherism on steroids that would massively increase the deficit, and the bond market revolted, and it ultimately led her to losing power, to being replaced by another prime minister in the UK. And in the US, we saw something not dissimilar where the bond market revolted against Trump's policies and he took a step back. So what exactly happened? Well, the 10-year bond yield on the 4th of April went under 4%. And then in the next few days, it significantly increased to 4.4%. What does this mean? Why is it important? Well, at the same time, the US stock market was in severe crisis, was crashing. And usually when the stock market crashes, investors will sell their stocks and buy bonds. And as they buy bonds, the yield on the bond will go down because there's more demand for the bond. However, because many foreign investors were simply selling US assets, period, getting out of all stocks and bonds and moving into foreign assets, what that meant is that there was less demand for US bonds. And furthermore, Trump's tariffs led to risks of more inflation, higher expectations of inflation. And as inflation expectations rise, bond yields rise because investors don't want to lose money over time with inflation. So while the stock market was crashing, the bond yields actually went up, not down, which is a huge problem for the US government. US Treasury securities are supposed to be seen as the safest reserve asset used around the world. They backstop the international financial system. Washington designed the international financial system in that way to give it the exorbitant privilege of printing the global reserve currency. And normally when there are moments of crisis and instability and volatility like this, there's something called a flight to safety, where investors will fly to the safety of US bonds. But instead, they were fleeing US bonds. So the US was doing significant damage to its own exorbitant privilege, which is ultimately why Trump took a step back. Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who's a billionaire hedge fund manager from Wall Street, has constantly reiterated that the Trump administration is dedicated to bringing down the yield on the 10-year Treasury security. And why is that? It's because the yield on the 10-year note is used as the basis for other important interest rates in the US economy. So for instance, if you go to a bank and you want to buy a house and get a mortgage, well, the bank is going to use the 10-year Treasury note yield as the basis for giving you a mortgage. If you want to get a 30-year mortgage, what is the interest rate that will charge you? Usually it's a spread above the 10-year yield. So if the 10-year yield is 4%, they'll probably give you a mortgage with a 6% rate. And this is true for other parts of the economy. If a company wants to borrow to make new investments, for instance, if they go to a bank and they ask for a loan, the bank will charge an interest rate based on the 10-year yield. Or if, for instance, if corporations want to sell bonds to investors, corporate bond yields are also closely related to the 10-year Treasury yield at a slight spread above. So the Trump administration has been desperate to try to bring down the 10-year yield, and yet the exact opposite is happening. It's been going up. And this is especially a concern for the Trump administration because it says that it wants to bring down US deficits, US government deficits. The US deficit is already over 120% of GDP. And one of the biggest expenses that the US government is paying is now interest on the national debt, because the US central bank, the Federal Reserve, significantly raised interest rates in 2022 because there was a lot of inflation coming out of the COVID pandemic due to supply chain shocks. And as the Fed raised interest rates, that also significantly increased the cost of US government borrowing, and the interest payments on US national debt skyrocketed and are now at over 3% of GDP, which is very close to military spending. And the US already spends more on the military than the next 9 largest foreign military spenders in the world combined. So this is a significant problem that the US government is really trying to grapple with. But honestly, the problem goes even deeper than just the bond market. That's what concerns the US government the most. But all parts of the US financial system are deeply intertwined and linked. And Trump's tariffs also unleashed another crisis in the US financial system, which was that hedge funds were facing the largest margin calls since the 2020 crisis at the beginning of the pandemic. What is a margin call? It refers to when an investor takes on lots of debt from a creditor, and the creditor, like let's say a hedge fund, is going to take on a lot of debt from a commercial bank. The bank gives them a loan, but then the bank demands collateral. And as collateral, the hedge fund may choose something like stocks that it owns. But if the price of those stocks plummets, as has been happening in the US stock market, then the creditor may demand some other collateral. The hedge fund will have to sell more stocks or bonds, which is what they did, because they need to get some cash to pay their creditor to show that they're not insolvent. So what happened? A lot of hedge funds were very over leveraged. They had so much debt, and they were engaged in something called the basis trade. What does that mean? It means that they're looking for little examples of arbitrage, little differences in the bond market that normally would be little cents. I mean, you're not really going to make much money, but if you're dealing with billions of dollars with lots of leverage, you can actually make a lot of money from engaging in this arbitrage. However, a lot of these hedge funds were very indebted, over leveraged, and the basis trade depended on stability. If there was a lot of volatility in stock prices, then it could blow up the entire basis trade, which is exactly what happened. So hedge funds got all of these margin calls from their creditors, and they began dumping not only stocks, which further accelerated the drop in the US stock market, but also bonds. So once again, we see how the US financial system is actually quite fragile. I mean, it's not surprising for anyone who remembers the 2008 financial crisis, in which the US almost took down the entire global financial system. But what we now see is that although the US government constantly reassures us that they solved all of the problems that led to the 2008 financial crisis, we can see some cracks emerging in the system that could become bigger and bigger and cause a serious crisis. And these problems on Wall Street are causing significant turmoil inside the Trump administration, because Trump appointed 13 billionaire oligarchs as officials in his administration, and they're losing a lot of wealth because the tariffs caused the stock market to crash. This is why Elon Musk, the world's richest billionaire oligarch, was heavily pressuring Trump to take a step back and to pause the tariffs. Musk has been losing a lot of wealth because Tesla stock has been hit really hard throughout all of the volatility of this tariff crisis. Ironically, you know where half of Tesla cars are made? In China. So as Trump is massively escalating this economic war against China, it's causing significant problems for Tesla. And people around the world are boycotting Teslas in protest of Elon Musk because he's a top official in the Trump administration. So Tesla is in serious crisis, and its stock has been plummeting. And Musk has been begging Trump to please pause the trade war. And many other billionaire Trump backers were doing the same. The billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, who strongly supported Trump, he also constantly called for Trump to issue a 90-day pause on tariffs, which, by the way, is exactly what Trump did. The Wall Street Journal reported that Trump was also listening to the billionaire CEO of JP Morgan Chase, the largest U.S. bank. Its CEO is Jamie Dimon, and he went on Fox News, which Trump is constantly watching. And Jamie Dimon said, Trump, please take a step back on these tariffs. You're going to cause an economic crisis. And apparently Trump listened to him, because we can now see that Trump's real constituency are not average Americans, not the working class. It's billionaire oligarchs on Wall Street. Those are his real base of support. And in fact, related to all of this scandal, Trump has been accused of market manipulation, because he has been enriching his billionaire friends and boasting about it in the White House. On the 9th of April, Trump posted on his Twitter copy, Truth Social, he said, quote, "This is a great time to buy," end quote. And then just a few hours later, he announced his tariff pause. So the stock market ripped upward and investors made a lot of money. And then Trump invited billionaire oligarchs to the White House, and Trump's communications assistant, Margot Martin, published a video of Trump meeting with billionaires from Wall Street, including Charles Schwab, who is a billionaire oligarch who's very conservative, very closely linked to the Republican Party. And the financial services company Charles Schwab is named after him. And Trump boasted that his billionaire friends made $2.5 billion and $900 million in one day.
This is Charles Schwab. It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. That's not bad. He's in financial.
Just think about how crazy that is. This billionaire made $2.5 billion in one day. And was this corruption? We have to ask. Is Trump giving insider information to his billionaire friends? Is Trump text messaging his billionaire oligarch friends and saying, you really need to buy some stocks now because the S&P 500 is going to rip upward. I'm about to announce a pause to my tariffs. I mean, the Trump administration is so cartoonishly corrupt. And this isn't even to mention the meme coin scam that Trump and his wife Melania launched. And after Trump coin was launched, Trump coin insiders made $100 million in profits in the first few weeks, whereas hundreds of thousands of investors lost their money. And these were Trump supporters. So Trump has been scamming his own supporters, telling working class Americans that they can get rich by buying his meme coin, while he's inviting billionaires to the White House and boasting about how they make billions of dollars in one day. And meanwhile, Trump is waging this economic nuclear war against China, which could cause serious problems in the US and blow back really hard on the US economy. And again, I must stress, it's going to be working class Americans who suffer because of this, not Trump's rich friends. And it's going to potentially be working class people around the world in other countries as their economies are disrupted because of the new Cold War that the US empire is desperately waging, trying to weaken and undermine China, to try to maintain US global hegemony. On that note, I'm going to conclude. Please like and subscribe.
So, who did we get to be our guest at the end of a week in which US-China relations and trade was the biggest story in the world? Well, only the doyen of China commentators, Sean Ryan, author of The Split, Finding the Opportunities in China's Economy in the New World Order. How lucky are we that Sean joins us now? How did it all look to you? Were you gazing at it in disbelief, or did you expect it, Sean?
George, it's great to be here during this age of uncertainty. First off, in the beginning of the week, there was a lot of anger and a lot of anxiety in China, but there was also a word that I want to highlight was resolve. The Chinese people coalesced around Xi Jinping and the CPC and said, if Trump is going to slap 84% tariffs on us, if Trump is going to slap 125% tariffs on us, we are going to bind together and we are going to be a strong Chinese nation and push back very hard. I think Trump is getting very bad advice from people like Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, as well as Peter Navarro, his advisor on trade, because they think that the Chinese are going to bend their knee to Trump, and that's just not going to happen. Basically, Xi Jinping has dealt with a lot more pain than Trump ever has. You know, when Xi was 15 years old, he actually spent 8 years living in a cave. When I first moved to China in the 1990s, many Chinese told me that they hadn't eaten meat more than once every month or two. So the Chinese people were prepared for pain. They were prepared to push back against Trump and show the world that China is the new global world superpower and there's a new world order. So that was the beginning of the week, George. And then after Trump yesterday stepped back and said, well, we're going to exempt tariffs on iPhones, computers, and other electronic devices, the Chinese people feel they've beaten the United States in round one, and they're pushing back and they're laughing. They're laughing at Trump right now. One of the most popular memes in social media today is a picture of Donald Trump looking like a schoolgirl sitting on his bed saying, when will Xi Jinping call me? Why won't he call? And that's what's happening right now. So there was a lot of anxiety and resolve in the beginning of the week, but by the end of the week, there was a lot of happiness and a sense of relief that Trump wasn't going to go too far, George.
I don't know who should call who first. Probably Trump, because he's the one that launched this blitzkrieg on China, economic, financial blitzkrieg. But it would be a good idea for Trump and Xi Jinping to meet an early opportunity, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The two should have a phone call. The two should meet. But both of them are playing a game of chicken. Neither of them wants to appear weak to the other. Neither of them wants to appear weak to the rest of the world. But look, these tariffs don't make sense. Nobody wins with the tariffs. It's not like China's going to win. It's not like the United States is going to win, because customers on both sides are going to get hurt. Now, aside from customers paying tariffs, you already see some of the pain that's hitting, say, American companies. So Tesla has stopped selling their Model S and their Model X, their two high-end vehicles in China, which used to sell very well. But in the retaliation, the Chinese have slumped 84% tariffs onto the importing Teslas. So Elon Musk and Tesla's hurting. That's got to pressure one of Trump's most valued advisors. But on the other side, for the Chinese, it doesn't help either. So we need to have both countries, both leaders talking together and having some pragmatism. I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon, because the United States is really trying to cripple and contain China's economic growth. The good side and the wild card, George, is that you're getting pressure from the rest of the world. Last week, I was in China, I was in Thailand, and I was also in Brussels, in Belgium, keynoting a conference there. And what I was surprised about was how even the Europeans and the people in Thailand were really against what Trump was doing. And these are historically strong allies of the United States. And they were saying, well, why is Trump tariffing us? What have we done to deserve such tariffs? And you could even see, even in Brussels, where Ursula von der Leyen has always pushed for de-risking and even decoupling from China, she is starting to say, it's a new world order, it's a new world, it's a new time. Maybe we need to pivot closer back to China. And that's why there's rumors that there are discussions about getting rid of the tariffs on Chinese NEVs, new energy vehicles, being imported into Europe. So right now, Xi is not going to be the first person to make the call. He wants to show Europe, he wants to show ASEAN, he wants to show the global majority that China's not scared and isn't going to bow down. And most importantly, that China isn't going to bow down is the message that he needs to send to the domestic Chinese population, who again have that word resolve to stand up to what they consider to be imperialism and bullying, George.
Well, I hope I can finally get one of these Chinese new energy vehicles. So I hope you're right and that the sanctions are lifted. But the politics of this are what lies behind it, really. I mean, some people say, Brian Berletic being one eminent commentator who takes the view that the United States is bent on confrontation, even to the point of war against China, and that these are merely the opening shots. Where do you stand on that? Do you think these are opening shots of something even more dangerous than global trade war? Or is this about positioning for this new world that we unarguably are now entering into?
So I think Brian is a very smart man, and I have a lot of respect for him, but I disagree with him on this point. I actually think the threat of war has really gone down under Trump. He likes to talk. He likes to use a shock and awe strategy and try to scare people, unlike Biden, who is more quiet. But the difference is that Biden would actually sell arms to the Ukrainians. He would actually launch military action around the world. Trump is more like a paper tiger. He talks big. And what he likes to do is use his acolytes, or the people surrounding him, sycophants almost. Marco Rubio, who's one of the biggest China hawks, is now Secretary of State. And he's constantly criticizing China for what happens in Tibet, what happens in Xinjiang, what happens in Hong Kong. You have Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, who I actually know. I've known him for 10, 15 years now, and I used to advise him on his China strategy when he was a hedge fund investor. And it was very difficult talking to him because his whole thesis on China was China's communist, so it's going to fail. It was ideological. He wasn't using numbers. He wasn't looking at were consumers spending more. He wasn't looking at what was fixed asset investment. For Scott, it was always, it's a communist country, China can't succeed. And so I think Trump is using people like Besant and Rubio to say, if you don't follow what the US wants, you'll cut your throat, which is what Besant said to the Spanish prime minister. Rubio is attacking on human rights, but Trump will back down. As you've seen, in less than 12 hours after slapping 125% tariffs on China, the bond markets went to over 4.5%. You started to see that Apple had hired 6 airplanes to ship 1 million iPhones from China and India into the United States to beat the tariffs. In less than 12 hours, the pressure from the American business community and, very importantly, the bond markets, which...
Oh, what a pity. What a pity. Let's try and get back to Sean, because that was just getting even more interesting. And I do want to complete that conversation. Now, look, we're unable to get a video link back to Sean Ryan, but he's rejoining the show on the telephone right now. Sean, I was fascinated by what you were saying. You got to the point about the bond markets and about the pressure, internal pressure from U.S. capital itself, having forced this U-turn. We agreed, you and I, that it's about time these two men spoke. Pick it up from there, if you would.
Well, it's important, George, that Xi Jinping and Donald sit down and talk. And I think that, importantly, Trump likes to do a lot of shock and awe strategy. So that's what I was saying before I got cut off, was that he's using Scott Bessent and Marco Rubio as attack dogs to try to pressure China. But the reality is, two things happened. Trump started to get a lot of internal domestic pressures. So Apple, allegedly flew 1 million iPhones on 6 airplanes from China and India into the United States to save about $400 million worth of tariffs. Wow. So you started to get the business community in the United States saying to Trump, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. We're going to get crushed. That we've lost $5 trillion US in the stock market. Companies like Apple are acting almost as if it's on wartime footing. And most importantly, the United States has $37 trillion US of debt. And a lot of that debt is rolling over this year. And so they have to pay very high interest rates. And in a time of stock market volatility, George, what usually happens is America's treasury bills are considered a safe haven, and interest rates drop as investors flood into buying T-bills. But what happened last week was the exact opposite. Global investors were so scared about the chaos in Trump's methods and mind that the interest rates actually went up to 4.5%, which meant that America's debt crisis was getting even worse. And global investors, there's rumors that it was the Japanese, rumors that it was the Chinese, were selling off their T-bills en masse and causing the interest rates to raise up. And so Trump really had to back down because he was getting pressure, not just from the Apples of the world, not just from the stock market, but most importantly, the debt crisis was getting worse. And so Trump had to back down. And that's why in China, the last 2 days, there's been a sense of euphoria and excitement that the Chinese, at least in this round, have beaten Trump.
Yeah, it's a kind of Chinese New Year all over again. I can see that. China, of course, possesses a lot of U.S. debt and can at any time begin to sell it off. Obviously, dumping it would be an expensive loss for the Chinese, but it might be a price they would consider worth paying. So the ability to sell American debt by Japan, China, or whomsoever is another source of pain that's still there up the sleeve of the people who hold that debt, isn't it?
Exactly. You're exactly straight on. So China and Japan, they don't want to sell their debt too much because, well, they lose value. But this is just another tool in the shed along with other mechanisms, such as like banning the sale of rare earths to the United States as a way to pressure the U.S. So, for instance, like in my new book, The Split, I have a whole chapter on rare earth. What a lot of people don't realize is that China refines about 85% of the world's rare earth supply. They refine almost 95% of the rare earth premium supply that goes to Europe. And rare earths go into everything that everyday consumers use: refrigerators, mobile phones, electric vehicles. Without Chinese rare earths even, the United States can't use good quality radar and missiles in their weapons. So this is really the nuclear option for China. So they can use T-bills, they can ban the export of rare earth, and they have those nuclear options available that could really add pressure to the United States. Now, China doesn't want to do this, George. China feels that this tension is stupid and foolish. They want to keep on making products and selling products for Europe and America because that benefits not just the Chinese worker, but it also benefits the American and European workers. At the end of the day, the United States, in my mind, they don't even have enough workers to work in hotels and work in factories. How are they going to get enough workers to make iPhones and T-shirts and Nike Air Jordans? It just doesn't make any sense, this tension.
Well, they're having to lift the deportation orders on hotel workers and agricultural labor and so on, precisely for the reason you just mentioned. And it was revealed today, I don't know if you saw it, Sean, that 80% of the goods in the Trump shop in Trump Towers are made in China. I mean, the American public are being played with all this anti-China stuff, aren't they?
They're absolutely being played. I mean, look, over the last 20 years, the United States everyday consumer, people like my family, I'm American, I'm a proud American, but our quality of life has certainly gotten better because Chinese factory workers are willing to make the products that we like to consume. Without China, then prices at Walmart, prices on Amazon would go up 30, 40, 50%. And that's, again, why companies like Apple were starting to send their products on airplanes to beat the tariff deadline. So it really just doesn't make sense. The problem we have right now, George, is that there isn't economic pragmatism in D.C. Right now, there's just full-blown xenophobia. So it's sort of an ideological battle between a liberal democracy or American imperialism versus China. And that's where it gets very dangerous because you're acting in ways in D.C. that doesn't make sense for the best interests of the American people because too many people in D.C. are just scared. They're fear-mongering about China's rise. You saw David Perdue, who is Trump's pick to be the next U.S. ambassador to China. He wrote a few months ago that the Chinese are trying to implement a communist system in the United States and implement the Chinese way of life and political system, which threatens the American way. Now, this is ridiculous. I don't see China trying to implement its political system in the United States, not in ASEAN, not in the Philippines, anywhere except what it considers its core areas of sovereignty. So that would be Tibet, that would be Hong Kong, that would be Taiwan. So those are areas that China is definitely trying to say, this is mainland China, this is under the purview and power of the CPC. There's no question about that. But China is not trying to become a hegemon, forcing other countries to adopt the Chinese political way in the same way that the United States, since the end of World War II, has tried to force American-style democracy on the rest of the world. That's just not happening with China. So there's too much fear-mongering, George, in the United States. The U.S. and China working together, that's a real win-win for both countries.
There's also a staggering level of cultural misunderstanding from Western countries. And I alluded to it in my monologue. When Vice President Vance talks disparagingly about Chinese peasants, he would appear to have no idea of how that kind of stuff plays in Peking, to coin a phrase. The insult, routine insult, against 1.5 billion humans in the world's biggest manufacturing power in the world, the second biggest economy in the world, if not indeed the first. This kind of Orientalism is quite staggering from such high personages of the United States, is it not?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I agree 100%, George. I think there's two points I want to highlight on this. The first is when J.D. Vance calls Chinese peasants. It just shows how unsophisticated he is personally. I mean, in many ways, we should be calling him a peasant because he might be intellectually smart, but he's very unsophisticated and he's not very worldly. I think
he's a
spent about
hillbilly.
6 months in Iraq in 2005.
Yeah, he told us he was a hillbilly.
Exactly. He's a hillbilly. You know, he might have gone to a few good Ivy League schools. Who cares? They're overrated. I went to Harvard too. I think they're overrated systems. But J.D. Vance, I don't think has ever been to China. I've spent the last couple days furiously researching if he's ever actually visited mainland China, and I don't think he has. So I think he's kind of an unsophisticated rube. The second thing is that sort of arrogance and condescension is really inherent, not just in the United States, but let's be honest, in Western Europe.
Yeah.
A lot of leaders. When I was in Brussels last week, a lot of Europeans were telling me, you know, we've been to China. We do business with China. We see that Chinese companies have moved up the value chain. They're not just producing cheap toys, but they're now innovative. You know, I was talking with a Serbian businessman who said that he used to buy German equipment for 90,000 euros. And now he's switched to a Chinese supplier because they're selling it for a third of the price at only 30,000 euros, and the quality is just as good. And so I think the reality is J.D. Vance and a lot of European leaders are underestimating the innovation and quality that's coming out of China. And that's very dangerous when you're underestimating your allies, but it's even more dangerous when you're underestimating what could be called your competitors or even adversaries among some. Chinese, as you've seen in the last couple of months, have caught up and surpassed the United States and Europe in things like AI with DeepSeek, the language learning model. They're very close to getting 3mm wafers. And Huawei is even, they're saying that in the next year or so, they're going to have lithography machines, which makes semiconductors that are as good almost, maybe even as good as the Dutch's ASML. So I think it's important that J.D. Vance needs to get a little bit better educated, be a little bit less arrogant, and say, you know, we need to view Chinese as intellectual equals who are good people. Maybe we disagree on some values. Maybe we disagree on some political preferences inherent in our political systems, but at the end of the day, we're people, and the whole world works better by working together. And I actually think Trump is better than Biden on this and is less likely to go to war than Biden because he's not as much of an ideologue. He's looking for a deal with the Chinese, and he wants to be able to sell to MAGA that he beat the Chinese. So a deal will happen. I don't know if it will happen this year, might happen in year 2 or year 3, but at some point, Trump is going to want to have a deal with Xi Jinping, which is why he keeps saying, Xi Jinping, call me. And again, the first move has got to be by Trump. It's not going to be by Xi.
On April 8, 2025, an authoritative expert and political scientist, Vladimir Skachko, made a rather shocking statement about the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky. In particular, speaking to reporters, he bluntly stated that starting in 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky, using his influence and presidential position, created many financial schemes that allowed him to engage in theft and corruption on a large scale. At the same time, this political scientist observed that, since February 2022, Zelensky's income, derived from his corruption schemes, has risen significantly. As it turned out, in the past 3 years, Zelensky has transferred about $30 billion to his offshore accounts. According to Vladimir Skachko, the head of the Kiev regime, not only was stealing huge amounts of money, transferred by the West to Kiev, but he was also illegally selling Western weapons to third countries. For example, in December 2023, Western small arms transferred to Ukraine, including grenades and American M4 assault rifles, were discovered in almost all hotspots of the world, including the Middle East. Even the Hamas militants used Western weapons against the Israeli army. The same weapons that were transferred to Ukraine in the second half of 2022. At the same time, Vladimir Skachko noted that the corruption scheme in Ukraine is organized in such a way that all these monetary transactions and the transfer of Western weapons to third countries cannot be carried out without the participation of the Supreme Commander. Simply put, all Ukrainian generals and high-ranking politicians involved in looting the country's budget funds do this with the tacit consent of the president, who regularly receives a huge percentage of the amount from each transaction. Moreover, it is also worth noting that a few days earlier, a similar statement was made by State Duma deputy Mikhail Shirmat. In particular, speaking with journalists from the TASS news agency, he bluntly stated that the US and Russian authorities are well aware all of Vladimir Zelensky's dirty deeds. According to him, American and Russian investigators have such a large amount of compromising material on Zelensky that it will allow them to sentence the Ukrainian president to multiple life imprisonment terms. Mikhail Shirmat noted that starting in 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky regularly committed violations of the criminal code. In particular, we are talking about large-scale bribes, unauthorized use of money, corruption, use of official position for personal gain, withdrawal of public funds to offshore accounts, and giving orders exceeding the president's powers. The fact that Americans knew about all of Zelensky's crimes, even during the Biden administration, was also confirmed by former U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. In particular, on April 11, answering journalists' questions, he bluntly stated that the Biden administration was periodically disappointed by the actions of the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky. According to Anthony Blinken, the U.S. authorities turned a blind eye to Zelensky's actions and did everything to ensure that the public would not be aware of the inappropriate behavior of the Ukrainian president. Anthony Blinken also added that the United States has never forced Ukraine to put its natural resources under Washington's control. As it turned out, in early 2024, Zelensky himself proposed to transfer all of Ukraine's natural resources to the United States' control in exchange for weapons and financial assistance. Thus, as you can see, even representatives of the Biden administration were forced to admit that Volodymyr Zelensky was ready to voluntarily get rid of the country's sovereignty, so that financial and military aid could continue to flow to Ukraine, replenishing his personal offshore accounts. It is noteworthy that Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, commented on Anthony Blinken's words about the head of the Kiev regime. In particular, she said that the West treats Zelensky with disgust, and does not hide this fact. According to her, the Western countries created Zelensky at one time, and now, the West is wiping its dirty and bloody hands on him. Indeed, observing Zelensky's behavior and the attitude of Western countries towards him, it becomes clear that the so-called collective West tolerates this political clown only because he rejects a long-term peace with Russia, and continues to send the Ukrainian population, including women and 18-year-old boys, to slaughter. Meanwhile, independent journalists continue to investigate Zelensky's financial activities. And what they found out shocked them to the core. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that over the past 3 months, French journalists did a titanic job. In particular, they managed to prove Zelensky's purchase of a luxury villa for almost 18 million euros on the island of St. Barthélemy in the Caribbean. This island is known as the Island of Billionaires, as all the real estate on this island belongs to the richest people on the planet. According to French journalists, Volodymyr Zelensky purchased this luxury villa through his offshore company Alderanti Ltd, whose director is a close friend of Zelensky, Svetlana Pishchanskaya. Moreover, French journalists also managed to prove Zelensky's purchase of France's largest private investment bank, Milius Banks. According to them, one of Zelensky's offshore structures acquired a controlling stake in this private bank for 1.1 billion euros. In addition, the journalists also managed to prove Zelensky's purchase of numerous expensive properties in Italy, including the Tenuta del Palagio winery, in the Italian region of Tuscany. Reports indicate that Zelensky bought this winery from the famous singer Sting, for 75 million euros. It is also worth noting the investigations of the Irish journalist Che Bowes. In particular, he managed to prove that in 2025, Zelensky and his entourage bought 13 luxury Rolls-Royce Spectre cars. At the same time, this journalist noted that these luxury cars were bought with European taxpayers' money. And now, in April 2025, it became known about a new major purchase by the head of the Kiev regime, this time in South Africa. So, in early April, journalists from the South African television channel, SABC News, managed to prove that Volodymyr Zelensky purchased a controlling stake in Northam Platinum Ltd, which is the largest platinum mining company in South Africa. According to them, the head of the Kiev regime bought 51% of the shares of this company, for almost $2 billion. At the same time, journalists described this deal as one of the most significant on the market, as this company is very profitable. As it turned out, Northam Platinum Ltd, in addition to platinum mining, also mines copper, palladium, and other expensive metals. Many experts are confident that Zelensky's acquisition of a private investment bank and a large platinum mining company is part of the long-term plans of the head of the Kiev regime. Experts believe that Zelensky is planning to flee Ukraine, while a private bank in France and a profitable company in South Africa will provide him and his family with a comfortable and luxurious lifestyle. However, the well-known Ukrainian politician Viktor Medvedchuk called Zelensky the executioner of Ukraine and expressed confidence that this dead man walking would be punished sooner or later. At the same time, he noted that Zelensky would be punished by the Ukrainians themselves.
Approach here around the nuclear question with Iran has been very hostile, to say the least. The person Morandi brought up, the U.S. intelligence threat assessment, it says quite clearly, we continue to assess Iran as not building a nuclear weapon, direct quote. But yet he began with sending a threatening letter, bombers to Diego Garcia, And according to the New York Times, the U.S. position appears to be that they want to not only dismantle a vast nuclear fuel enrichment infrastructure of Iran, the country's missile program as well, and Iran's longtime support for the axis of resistance. These are very maximalist positions. What do you make of this direction?
There's not a chance in the world that Iran is going to give up its allies in the region. Not a chance in the world. And there's not a chance in the world that it's going to give up its conventional capabilities, because Iran knows what will happen subsequently. The United States is ruthless, and the Israeli regime is totally barbaric. So those are off the table. The nuclear program, as long as Iran's sovereignty is preserved, negotiations can take place. We've done them many times before, but excessive demands will not be accepted, especially because Iran feels that the world has changed.
Well, before I start, I just want to say it's been a pleasure knowing you, Professor Morandi, and I'm sorry that your government's going to arrest you shortly after this program and bring you to the justice you so richly deserve. I just want to. I'm saying that.
I'm sure Pierce would be very happy to see that happen.
You know, I just want to remind the viewers real quick. When was the last time the Iranian security services kicked down your door, Professor Morandi, and seized your computers and stole your papers? Never.
I know. Yeah.
When was the last time the FBI kicked down my door and stole my computers and stole my papers? Past August. So when we're talking about countries that oppress people for speaking out, Iran's not the problem. The United States is the problem. So let's keep that straight. Look, my background is not of diplomacy. I've been a diplomat. I've done diplomatic things. My background is as a United States Marine, and that includes my experience as weapons inspectors. Marines are very direct. We're very blunt, and we can become brutally blunt. And so, in the process of this, of these negotiations or these interactions, I'll say, I've been very blunt, and sometimes my bluntness might be misinterpreted. But there is no daylight between Dr. Morandi and I when it comes to the facts of the situation. No daylight whatsoever. I wrote a book about Donald Trump pulling out of the JCPOA. You know what the title was? Deal breaker. Right? He's a deal breaker. He's not a deal maker. He's a deal breaker. We know this. We know this. It's not anything. So where does the problem arise? The problem arises, again, it's not an Iranian problem, it's an American problem. Do you remember when I talked about the JCPOA? I said the problem with the JCPOA wasn't because of what Iran did, it's how America behaved, how Barack Obama boxed himself into a corner with his irresponsible rhetoric threatening war, and finally be confronted with the fact that he had reached that threshold where either we go to war or we make a compromise. Okay, at that time, the United States was not prepared to go to war with Iran. We didn't have the capacity to do so. We were knee deep in conflicts in the Middle East. We were trying to get ourselves disentangled in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the last thing we were going to do is get involved in a major war with Iran. And one of the reasons is that the war was being couched at that time in purely conventional terms. Iran's program had not gone underground. Iran's program had not developed to the extent that it was a breakout or threshold capability. So from a military planning perspective, the belief was that we could interdict Iran's programs using conventional weapons alone, precision guided strike, etc. And then the realization came that, yeah, we probably weren't going to achieve that objective. And now once we initiate something, we would have to follow through with follow-on military action, which would require hundreds of thousands of troops in a proposition where victory was not guaranteed. And we just weren't going to go to war against Iran. So we opted the negotiation path. I would say that Trump has boxed himself into a similar corner. What is the one thing that's in common between Obama's position, Biden's position, and Trump's position? Is that the Israeli government has been pressuring the United States to launch military attacks against Iran for some time now. The other thing that connects everybody through this time is that the policy of the United States has never been singularly focused on Iran's nuclear program, but on regime change. And the sanctions program that we have been enforcing against Iran is a regime change program. It's the same mentality, the same prospects. I've been studying OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control. I've been studying their interaction with the Department of Treasury, with CIA, the State Department, on how they impose sanctions on Iraq. Iraq's sanction program was a regime change sanction program. Okay, Syria, a regime change sanction program. Libya, a regime change sanctions program. This is what we do. And we've been imposing a regime change sanction program on Iran since 2002. Some would say even prior to that. We have never tolerated the Islamic Republic. We've always viewed the Islamic Republic as an affront. We were supporters of the Shah, so we obviously were upset when the Shah was overthrown. The seizure of the American embassy and that whole hostage debacle, which concluded with American troops dying, 8 of them dying, perishing in fire on Desert One. That anniversary is coming up, April 25th. This scarred.
Just for your viewers, because many of them won't know this, but the Iranians didn't kill them. The Americans, their helicopters crashed and hit each other in Iran, and 8 of them were killed.
Correct. No, Iran most certainly didn't kill anybody. It was our helicopter crashing into a C-130 tanker that killed 8 American crew members. But we blame Iran because we say we wouldn't have been there if the hostages hadn't been taken, et cetera. I'm not going to get into discussion about that. What I'm trying to do is say that there's the history of the bombing of the Marine barracks. All of this lends itself to a very negative attitude on the part of the United States. We've spoken, Danny, you and I, about Russophobia many times, and how the administration and the media poisons the minds of the American people about Russia. There has been, I don't know what we would call it, Iranophobia, but there's been the equivalent since 1979. We don't give Iran any benefit of the doubt. We condemn them. It's a blanket condemnation across the board with little or no effort to learn the reality of Iran. I've been to Iran one time in 2006, shortly after Ahmadinejad came into his presidency. I was shocked by what I saw. And what I mean by shocked is I was expecting a police state. I was expecting repression. I was expecting to be arrested the moment I got off the airplane, even though I was invited to go to Iran by Mr. Zarif, who was the ambassador at that time to the United Nations. And what I saw was a nation full of wonderful people who celebrated life. I was there during one of the big Iranian festivals. Maybe you know the one. They put lights in the streets and they build these monuments, these gateways, and just a beautiful time when people you walk out and people are barbecuing and they're giving you. I mean, you walk in and you're just fed for free as you walk by the various restaurants and stuff. They give you rose flavored water. It was beautiful. And the discussions were lively and energetic. And I was in restaurants where I had Revolutionary Guard. I mix up with the Iraqis. Revolutionary Guard at the table, and professors would show up, and they'd be having this free for all, and I'm expecting, handcuffs to come out and the billy clubs to come out, and they just sat there and they did it in front of me, a foreigner, having a very energetic discussion. I didn't see oppression. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I'm saying I didn't see it. And I also realized that we had been lied about everything about Iran. I knew that the nuclear program was a lie, but how we treated the Iranian people, how we treated the Islamic Republic, how we treated Ahmadinejad himself, who, I'm not going to say is my favorite person in the world, but I'm just saying that the way we presented him here in the United States is different from the way he was actually existed in Iran. We don't need to get into I know that he's not the most popular person in Iran either. But my point is, the Iranians can talk about this. So there is a freedom of expression in Iran that surpasses anything Piers Morgan or the other Iranophobes could ever possibly imagine. So, I'm not going to sit here and say anything bad about Iran. It's just not going to happen. The problem isn't Iran's fault. The problem is America's fault, 100%. But that doesn't mean it isn't your problem too. This is the point I've been trying to make. You see, Obama had a conventional military problem thrust upon him. Trump, in his first term, confronted by the reality of what Iran had done legally, not illegally, legally, but 60% enrichment, going underground, etc., when they had to look at the potential for military action, conventional military power was insufficient to achieve anything. We couldn't even begin a conventional fight with Iran because the consequences would be immediate and devastating against us. Iran has ballistic missile capacity to reach out and touch American installations in the region. We have no defense against this. Iran has the ability to damage or destroy the energy production capacity of the Middle East, gas and oil. And there's nothing we can do. They can shut down the Strait of Hormuz on demand. Nothing we can do. We have no conventional military response to Iran. So what Trump did is task the American nuclear establishment through a nuclear posture review and then nuclear employment plans to develop a nuclear response to Iran. Now, me saying this doesn't mean I approve of it. I condemn it wholeheartedly. But it is a reality, and it's not theoretical. This is real. These nuclear weapons that were produced on the direction of Donald Trump have been produced, have been deployed, and are incorporated into a plan of military action against Iran's nuclear infrastructure. So this is when I talk about the threat of nuclear war. It's not that I'm threatening you. I hope you don't take what I'm saying as a threat, Dr. Moretti. I'm not threatening you or the Iranian people. I'm stating reality. The reality is Donald Trump's rhetoric has boxed him into a corner where we have created a problem for which there is only one solution, and that's the military solution, which has been configured exclusively to use nuclear weapons. This is insane. This is crazy. This is lunatic, but it's real. It's as real as the day is long. And so what I've been saying is that, okay, Dr. Miranda, you accurately said that Iran did what it did after 2019, after they gave the West a year. They did what they did for leverage. But that leverage worked too well. You see, now your leverage has allowed the Trump administration and others to see, in the past, when we talked about Iran's nuclear program, it was propaganda. When people said Iran is this far away from nuclear weapons, propaganda. Hell, excuse my language. Netanyahu's been saying Iran's been on the cusp of nuclear weapons since 1995. I mean, Iran's been 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon for 30 years, except today they are 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. That's the problem. We went from propaganda to reality. Your leverage has become so effective that this crazy, insane plan, which under normal circumstances, the Pentagon would say, Mr. President, we're not going to nuke Iran. It's disproportional. The military necessity is not there. It's a violation of the international law, etc. The Pentagon now says the only way we can attack Iran is with nuclear weapons. You were too successful. Your leverage worked too much. But in a way, and this is where we might have a difference of opinion, because I'm not going to be insulting to the Iranians at all, but I believe that your leadership recognizes the danger that exists. I believe your leadership understands that this insane man, this deal breaker, is in power today, and that he has an arsenal which he opts to use against Iran will be devastating to Iran. You may be able to land some punches that hurt, but I believe it would be fatal for Iran. I don't believe Iran can ride out an American nuclear attack because I've been a war planner and I understand the mentality of those who plan wars, and we don't go in lightly when we do nation-ending exercises. There's the mistake people make in talking about Iraq, talking about Afghanistan, talking about Yemen even. These are not, First of all, Iraq was a nation-ending exercise, and we succeeded in ending the nation of Iraq in terms of the government of Saddam Hussein. We succeeded in pushing the Taliban out, but these weren't nation-destroying exercises. These were government alteration exercises. Iran is a nation-ending event, meaning that if we go to war against Iran, it will be a nation-ending event. It will be so horrible. And I'm not justifying this. I condemn it. I don't want it to happen. I also recognize that the consequences of this will be horrific, not only for the Iranian people, but for the United States and the region. Because Iran, no war goes as it's planned. I don't think we can kill all of the Iranians in day one. And I think Iran will have a retaliation. And where are we? Nowhere. But the good news is, if there can be good news in any of this, is the supreme leader. And I'm going to say something again. I don't mean to be insulting, and please don't take it as an insult. But history has shown that when Iran has been confronted with nation-ending circumstances, that the supreme leader drank the poisoned chalice that was offered to him. And you know what I'm talking about, Professor Maradi, the end of the Iran-Iraq war, which ended in ways that Iran did not want. Iran had to accept things it did not want, but the leadership made a decision because it was the only decision that could be made to save the Iranian people. The leadership today, the supreme leader and those around him, have come out strongly against maximum pressure. Of course they have. And if they've come out strongly against the military threats, of course they have. But they know the only way out is negotiation. The question is, how do we get to the right negotiations? And that's the question. But I think what's happened here is both Iran and Trump have blinked. Trump has backed down. Danny, you said, the letter that was written to the supreme leader was an insulting letter. I apologize on behalf of the American people for that letter. Horrible letter. But it made demands about ballistic missiles and made demands about relationships and things. But Trump modified that statement before he sent Steve Witkoff off to Oman. He said, all I care about is the nuclear. All I care about is the nuclear, which means that Trump blinked. And now Iran, even though Iran is saying we're not going to do direct negotiations, we're going to do indirect, it doesn't matter. The point is, your foreign minister is going to be sitting down in the immediate vicinity of Steve Witkoff, and there's going to be an exchange of ideas. A negotiation is beginning that could lead to a resolution of the nuclear problem, and therefore giving Trump a way out of the problem he has created. This is a problem that Iran didn't create, a problem we created, but it's a danger to Iran. And thank goodness, because a lot of my criticism to Iran in the past weeks is the rejection of negotiations. And I kept saying there's only one way out of this. This lunatic, this madman, this deal breaker will use nuclear weapons. He's not bluffing. This is a real crisis. And the only way out is through negotiation. Now, how does Iran do this without looking weak, without being accused of bending the knee? I think we found the solution. Whether it was by design or by accident, Trump blinked, and then Iran said, okay, we're not opposed to negotiations, and now we're having negotiations. What happens in these negotiations, I can't predict. I don't think you can predict. Steve Witkoff, who I know you despise, but what I would say is this. Let's put Gaza aside, difficult to do given the enormity of the crimes being committed. He's the man that traveled to Moscow and broke the ice with Vladimir Putin, got through the impasse that prevented the United States and Russia from moving forward in their negotiations. He did that. Why? Because he is literally an extension of Donald Trump. And when he travels and speaks, he speaks as Donald Trump. And when he's in Oman right now, he is Donald Trump. And I think the Iranians understand this. Now, he said something interesting. I don't know what's going to happen from this, but he said, I'm prepared to travel to Iran. Now, we can be dismissive of it, but Professor Morandi, when was the last time the Biden administration said they're prepared to travel to Iran? They never said that. The Obama administration was not prepared to travel to Iran. Trump is saying, Witkoff, go to Iran if necessary. We want a deal. See, you won. You won. You use your leverage to get the United States to the negotiating table. It's very good, but it was a dangerous game. This is what I've been trying to point out. I expose the danger, not because I'm threatening Iran, but I'm being real about this because as I've told people, I ask people to love the Iranians more than they hate America. Love the Iranians more than they hate America. And what I mean by that is you are right to criticize Trump, criticize this, criticize that, but don't be so critical of America that you miss the opportunity for a deal that can save Iran. It may be a bitter chalice of poison. It's going to be, because you're going to have to make some sort of compromises. So it will be bitter. But Iran survived drinking that cup of poison in 1989. They survived, they thrived. And Iran will survive and thrive going forward. Russia just gave Iran the best way out. They just ratified a strategic framework agreement, which is telling the Iranians, cut a deal with America, and we will work with you to open you up to the East, to complete that pivot that Iran's been trying to make since the early 2000s. I'm just saying that the only way out of this is through negotiation. That's it.
There are 3 or 4 things that I would like to say, although I'm not sure if I remember them all. They're not. With regards to the Iran-Iraq war, which Scott knows I was involved in that war, I fought as a volunteer for years. When the leader, Imam Khomeini, accepted Resolution 598, it was a bitter drink for him, not or poisonous drink for him, not because Iran was on the verge of collapsing, but because Iran wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein for all of the crimes he had committed against the Iranian people. Remember, he was giving chemical weapons by the West. He slaughtered. The war was unprovoked. The West supported him. Arab regimes supported him. The Eastern Bloc supported him. And it was a bitter 8 years. And Iran was moving to unseat the regime when the Americans came into the Persian Gulf and started fighting alongside Saddam Hussein, then downing an Iranian airliner. And so he accepted the Resolution 598, but he accepted because Resolution 598 did accept Iran's sovereignty. And if there was no Resolution 598, he would not have accepted a ceasefire, because then Saddam would have just continued the war. So we had a basis. The reason why Iran didn't initially accept Resolution 598, which was passed during the height of the war, like a year or so before the ceasefire, during the Karbala 5 operations where I was shot in the arm. I was a military diver in that operation. That was the height of the war. It was very intense battles near Basra. And it was under that pressure that the UN Security Council passed Resolution 598, which met Iran's demands, except for one demand, and that was that determining the aggressor was put down like in, Article 8, and Iran wanted it to be in Article 1 because Iran knew that the US and the West would never allow Saddam to be condemned. That was the issue. So we had an acceptable agreement. It wasn't ideal for Iran, but Iran's sovereignty was respected, and so we ended the war. We preserved our sovereignty. Saddam Hussein failed, and his failure was reflected in the fact that his country was bankrupt and he went and invaded Kuwait. Of course, the US ambassador, the story between Saddam and her, all that aside, but he went into Kuwait and we had a new chapter in our region. So our ceasefire with Saddam Hussein was based on a resolution that preserved our sovereignty. And ultimately, Saddam was condemned, but that's a different story. The second issue is, Scott is right about Iranophobia, I guess. I don't know what it's called. One of the things that the Americans did and the Europeans was that they antagonized Iran for decades. And then their client regimes in the region, they antagonized Iran through sectarianism and racism. They basically were telling their own people that we're not Muslim. That's where the whole Wahhabism and ISIS and Al-Qaeda began to grow, and the extremist ideologies that we see in Afghanistan. And so this has nothing to Iran with Iran's policy. Iran has always been open about its support for the resistance, for Hamas, for Islamic Jihad, for Iran has been the most open about its views. But interestingly, the same people now they say, well, Mr. Erdogan, he's lying. He's doing a great job. He's pretending to the West that he's their ally. And he, in reality, is undermining the West and working for the Palestinian cause, which of course is nonsense. Most people are decent and most people want to live together in peace and prosperity. And it's these regimes like, Qatar has funded a lot of this, Saudi Arabia, sadly, Erdogan, others, the Americans. This divide and rule policy has been going on for 40 some decades. And so Iran is not only antagonized in the West, but it's antagonized in the region. But it's interesting how it has evolved over the last year and a half, because in reality, the only people who are supporting the Palestinians are the resistance. And it's Iran that is alongside Yemen and Hezbollah that they're paying a heavy price. Whereas Erdogan is selling his oil or transporting Aliyev's oil, the Emirates, they have good relations, the Egyptian regime, the Jordanian regime, and the list goes on. They all have excellent relations. So interestingly, the things have shifted a lot with regards to perceptions about Iran and Iranian intentions. Just one thing, Scott, and again, it's about tone, because what you said, which I think was what, and I didn't respond to this because I knew that's not what you meant, but what some people perceive to be critical of Iran or supportive of the United States. I think you said something like, hopefully Iran will put aside its dismantle parts of its program that the United States and Israel find to be like some sort of existential threat. And I think, and I'm sure you don't mean it in that way, because everything that you said today, I agree with about the history of the program, the nature of the program, the nature of the relationship. But that is, I think we all have to focus, as you've been doing tonight, on the fact that it's not Iran that's the existential threat, it's the United States, it's the Israeli regime, which you've been pointing out tonight. And I think maybe some people who were attacking you, and I never have attacked you online, and you're the only person probably that I've been on your show at 3 a.m. I don't do that. If you recall, once I came on your show, it was like 3 a.m. So
I remember that.
out of respect, out of respect for what you do, you invited me, I think, twice, and I think both were pretty late, if I'm not mistaken. But all I can say at the end, and because this is that Iran takes that into consideration, but Iran also is preparing itself for that situation. In other words, Iran has underground drone bases and missile bases across the country. And there are so many that I think they're probably in the hundreds. And they are prepared for that day that the Americans do carry out that. And the Americans would have to use hundreds of nuclear weapons to prevent Iran from taking out everything. And when Iran takes out everything, that means the global economy is gone. I don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. None of us want to see it. But this is sort of like, and it's not equal in power, but it is a sort of mutual assured destruction.
Hi everybody, today is Saturday April 12th, 2025. And our friend, Professor Morandi, is back with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you, Nima. Thank you for having me.
Let's get started with the first round of negotiations between Iran and the United States, which were indirect talks, as Iranian Foreign Minister mentioned before doing the talks. What was the outcome, in your opinion, from what we've been hearing so far from the officials in Iran?
I think it was pretty good for Iran. Let's look at the background. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that when it comes to Iran, even though Western media, for the most part, hates Trump, but when it comes to Iran, they're anti-Iran, and they're trying to carry out psychological warfare and provide people with misinformation about what's going on. We saw that in the New York Times with a fake article saying that the Iranian leader was forced by others in Iran to change their position in a secret meeting and that sort of thing. This is the same New York Times that 3 years ago said he was on his deathbed, and then the next day he gave a public speech. That, I think, should remind people that they should steer clear of Western mainstream media, legacy media, if they really want real information. Now, what happened was that we've seen a lot of anti-Iranian rhetoric from Trump over the last few weeks, making threats, speaking about war. And then we had the letter, which was not a diplomatic letter. It was an inappropriately written letter. But then the Iranians said that no direct negotiations. But we kept hearing in Western media that they're going, and Trump himself said direct negotiations. The Iranians said no direct negotiations. It will be just like before. During the Biden years, we had indirect negotiations. As you recall, 3 years ago, for example, the weeks of negotiations that took place in Vienna over the nuclear program, and I was there during the whole time as a media advisor, they were all indirect negotiations. So nothing new happened today. It was a continuation of indirect negotiations. So Trump wanted direct negotiations, Iran said indirect negotiations. Trump sent the message through the Emirates. Iran said that the talks must take place in Oman. And there too, the Americans had to concede. And the reason is that Iran has much better relations with Oman, and the Americans have much better relations with Emirates. Now, some may say, what difference does this make? But it makes a lot of difference. The symbolism is important. Anyone who does business, anyone who buys or sells a house, everyone knows that these things matter. If you speak from a position of weakness, you're going to have difficulty at the negotiating table. If you speak from a position of strength, it has an impact at the negotiating table. So these two issues were resolved in a way in which was acceptable to the Iranians. So the direct negotiations that the Americans were demanding did not happen, and the indirect negotiations took place in Oman. Then the Iranians gave the Americans, I think, a consolation prize at the end of the negotiations when they were leaving. Wetkoff on the one hand and Dr. Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, they briefly met, and there were just a brief hello and goodbye. So it had nothing to do with the talks. So that, I think, was a big plus for Iran. Then, from what we heard from the Iranian foreign minister, the discussion was not about Iran's conventional military capability, because Iran said that is not going to be discussed. And it was not about Iran's regional alliances, which again, Iran said it is not going to negotiate. And from what Dr. Araghchi said, there were no threats made by the American side. So he seemed to indicate that it was constructive so far. But that really doesn't say a great deal, because we haven't entered the substance of the negotiations yet. So right now they're discussing, and I think next week they'll continue to be discussing I guess, a general framework so that after that they can begin the serious discussions. So mothballing Iran's peaceful nuclear program is off the table. If you look at this, up to now, this is all good for Iran, and it shows that the United States, up to now, is behaving very differently than what we've been hearing in the last few weeks. So Iran's steadfast position has achieved results. That doesn't mean that we're going to have an agreement. And it doesn't mean that there won't be major differences down the road. But so far, it's very different from what the Western media and what those who Western elites were trying to. It was very different from the narrative that they were producing and through which they were trying to intimidate Iranians and tell the international community that Iran is going to have to back down and that Iran is intimidated, as the fake New York Times article also tried to convey that message. So far it's good.
Here is what the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said, that both sides want a deal in a short term and not fruitless negotiations that drag on for months and years. But this won't be easy. This is the key, that this won't be easy. Why he believes that is not going to be easy to reach that if the Trump administration, do you think that he's considering what has happened between the United States and Russia, or he sees the difficulties of the deal, that they have to negotiate more on the issues?
I think it's both. I think it's the fact that Witkoff himself, who negotiated the ceasefire in Gaza, literally a couple of weeks later, Trump called for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. That was fundamentally against the ceasefire. And Witkoff, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, supported Trump's position. But this runs against what he put forward and the two sides signed. And also when Netanyahu reimposed the starvation siege, violated the ceasefire agreement, and restarted the genocide, he was in clear violation of the ceasefire. But Witkoff, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, took sides with this genocidal regime. So that's a major problem. If Trump, with regards to Iran, tore up Obama's agreement, true that Obama did not abide by it, but Trump tore it up. But still, it was someone else's agreement. But the agreement that Witkoff himself negotiated and Trump approved, this was torn apart by the Israeli regime and the United States. So if Trump is not going to abide by his own commitments, how can Iran negotiate with him? That makes it very, very difficult. Then we see Russia. Trump promised to bring an end to the war. Of course, he initially said within 24 hours. It's been quite a long time now. Quite a few 24 hours have passed, and still the war is raging. Russia is advancing. Ukraine is losing. And Trump has still failed to take the necessary decisions to bring this to an end. And then, of course, we see the trade war. The trade war, again, over the last week has been an extraordinary, it's been an extraordinary week, let me put it that way. Every few hours, a new decision, and then shifting of position, and different people within the Trump team saying different things literally at the same time. And then after the collapse of the bond market or the fall of the bond market, Trump backed down. So this sort of behavior where the US president is unreliable, where he's constantly shifting his position, when he's backing away from his own commitments and agreements, that itself makes it very difficult to figure out how to come to an agreement. Because who knows, maybe you will agree to something, and then suddenly one morning you wake up and you see Trump has posted something outrageous on the internet. or on Truth Social. Then, of course, is the problem of the negotiations itself. The Iranians and the Americans have had a very difficult time in the past negotiating. In 2000, before 2015, there were years of negotiations. In 2015, we had a negotiated deal, the JCPOA. But as I said earlier, the Americans violated it from day one, literally day one. I was in Vienna during the 2015 negotiations with Dr. Zarif. And as the agreement was being signed, the ceremony to start the agreement was taking place, the United States imposed new sanctions, the Treasury. And then as we moved forward, Obama kept approving new sanctions, and so did Congress. So then, of course, 3 years ago, we had extensive talks. Again, I was there in Vienna as a media advisor for Dr. Bogheri. And we had months of negotiations there. We saw months of negotiations, and it was very difficult. And it took months for them to reach a text where they all approved, but the Europeans approved, the Iranians approved. They came to a text. The EU foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, he said that the Iranian demands were reasonable, but then the Americans didn't accept the deal. So it's been a big, this has been an issue for years. And the expectation is not, therefore, a swift, resolution to the problem. When we look at Trump's background, Trump's history, and the history of U.S. Behavior towards Iran, and the difficulties that we've had negotiating with the United States, and other grievances that the Iranians have, because this is all about the maximum pressure sanctions. The United States has been imposing sanctions on ordinary Iranians for many years, and they've been targeting women and children for well over a decade. The sanctions began over 4 decades ago, but the maximum pressure sanctions began under Obama. So this all means it's going to be difficult. We may not come to an agreement, and then again, we may come to a partial agreement. We may come to a comprehensive agreement, but it will probably, whatever happens, it will probably be a complicated road ahead, a difficult road ahead.
Do we know what was the main reason that the Trump administration decided to withdraw from JCPOA? Did they say something? Did they inform Iranian before withdrawing from the JCPOA? And did they address the issue that they had in those days?
Well, back then, Trump, it depends on who you believe. Trump, during the campaign in 2015, he was saying that was the nuclear deal was the worst deal ever made by the United States, and many say it's because of his personal animosity towards Obama that he took that position. Perhaps it has to do with an attempt to get support from the Zionist lobby. I can't say for certain. No one really can say a great deal about Trump with authority. If we, right now, as you and I speak, you may just say Trump made a statement right now and said something completely different. And I would not be surprised. It's very difficult to be surprised nowadays with Trump.
Nor do I.
Right now, you saw that he backed down on the tariffs and brought them all down to that 10%, and now he's backed down on laptops and cell phones and all the high-tech equipment, which is basically the most important element of China's exports to the United States. So obviously, he's Trump. It's difficult for me to understand what goes on it's impossible for me to know what goes on in his head. And I don't know what the reason really was, but from before his election, he was saying that he's going to tear up the deal. He said that he wants to put on maximum pressure sanctions and bring Iran to its knees. And he did, and he tore up the deal, and he reimposed maximum pressure sanctions, because the maximum pressure sanctions were first imposed by Obama, but Trump made them even tougher. So, but he failed. And the irony is, Nima, is that Trump is the reason why Iran has such an advanced nuclear program today. Because if Iran had remained within the JCPOA, even though the United States was violating the deal, it would have its nuclear program would have been much more limited than now. But then after Trump tore up the deal, the Iranians waited a full year. They continued to abide by their commitments. And that wasn't something I personally agreed with. I thought we should have restarted the program much sooner. And then after a year, the Iranians began to decrease their commitments every 2 months. And so after 2 years, Iran's nuclear program was back to normal. Again, I would have done it much faster, but that's just an opinion. Maybe there was a good reason for that. But the Iranians wanted to show the international community that it was the United States, not Iran. But after that, the Iranians went full speed ahead, developed their nuclear program further, and we are where we are today, where Iran's nuclear program is probably among the top 10 advanced programs in the world. Alongside that, and after Trump made threats against Iran, we saw Dr. Larijani, the advisor to the leader, say on television that if the nuclear program is attacked, we'll develop a nuclear weapon. So Trump has been pushing Iran in the direction of a nuclear weapon. It's his policies that have been pushing us in this direction. His statements, his policies over the years. But today, we've seen, I mean, it's far too early to conclude anything. But today we saw that the United States accepted Iran's demand for indirect talks. The United States accepted Iran's demand that the talks be held in Oman. And the United States did not raise the issue of conventional and weapons and Iran's regional relations, which has nothing to do with the United States. And so we'll have to see how things go ahead. And without a doubt, Iran is not going to mothball its nuclear program. There are ways, if Trump is truly simply afraid about Iran producing a nuclear weapon, there are ways to solve that. That's not a problem that cannot be resolved. And if Iran wanted a nuclear weapon, it would have made it many years ago.
Absolutely.
But it chose not to do so. Just like during the Iran-Iraq war, when the West was giving Saddam Hussein chemical weapons to use against Iranians, Iran chose not to produce chemical weapons. They made a political decision and based on their religious ideology, not to do so. And the same logic rules over the reasoning not to produce a nuclear weapon. But, as Dr. Larger pointed out, if it becomes an existential threat, then circumstances will change. But at the moment, we see a more reasonable environment, and we'll have to wait for next week to see if the United States wants to continue down the road of more rational behavior or not. And also, we'll have to see what Trump says. He may be actually speaking right now as you and I are speaking. I don't know.
Can we say for the last 15 years, Iran was able to build nuclear bombs, but they haven't decided to do that? Can we say that?
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt, yes. At least 15 years, I would say. Because the leader himself said this years ago, that we could have made it years back. So that would be something like at least 15 years. I don't know the exact dates, and I'm not privy to, like, and I'm not qualified as an expert to understand these technical issues. But yes, Iran could have made weapons a long time ago. But right now, the world has changed. This is not 1944, 1945 when the United States made a nuclear bomb. Iran is you know that Iran is very developed in high tech industries. In nanotechnology, it's probably the fourth, if not in third in the world. It's in stem cell research, in all areas of high tech technology. Iran is well advanced. That's why Iranian drones and missiles and so on are so good. So in today's world, where you have supercomputers and you have simulations and you have AI, it's much more easy for a country like Iran to move in that direction if it really wanted to. Iran has excellent missile capabilities. its nuclear program. As I said, it's one of the top 10 in the world. If Iran wanted to do so, it would have, but it chose not to do so. And there are reasons for that. One is Iran believes it's an immoral weapon, and we should stay away from it as far as possible. And the second is that having a nuclear weapon creates an environment where other countries in the region want nuclear weapons too, across Central Asia, the Caucasus, the Arabian Peninsula, and elsewhere. And some of these regimes are family dictatorships. They're inherently unstable. Some of them are rich, but that doesn't mean they're stable. None of the countries in the Persian Gulf are inherently stable. Qatar has a population of like 350,000 people. It has like the population of slaves and indentured servants in Qatar are much greater than the passport holding population. The same is true in the Emirates and so on. So these are family dictatorships, which who knows whether they'll be around 5 years from now. Just a few years ago, the Saudis and the Emiratis put a siege on Qatar and almost overthrew the regime. If it wasn't for Iran, Qatar would have fallen. And we see how thankful Qatar is after what they did to the people of Syria. But anyway, so these are not stable countries, inherently speaking. And therefore, it's the Iranians believe that as far as possible, it's best not to have a nuclear weapon because it would create problems across the whole region.
We had Witkoff in his visit yesterday to Moscow, and he met with Vladimir Putin. In your opinion, that was related to what was going on today and with the meeting between Iranian party and American party? And how do you see, is there any sort of relation between the two meetings right before the talks?
No. I mean, they may have briefly discussed the issue. The Iranians, when they meet their counterparts, they discuss all sort of issues. When they meet the Russians, they discuss Ukraine. When they meet the Europeans, they discuss Ukraine. When they meet the Chinese, they discuss the Ukraine. And this is not strange. But Russia and the United States have more than enough problems. They have not been resolved. And even though they're holding talks both in Moscow and abroad, like in Istanbul and elsewhere, they have a tough road ahead. And we don't know. There's still no. It's not clear if there will be an end to the conflict. A ceasefire, of course, is not acceptable to Russia, but it's not clear when there will be an end to the conflict and how that conflict will end. And the Russians, you know as well as I, there are reports coming in that the Russians are preparing for a much more powerful punch, and that could change the equation more rapidly in the coming months ahead. So they have more than enough to talk about, and the Iranians they do their own negotiations. Something that came up recently on different platforms, and you may have had it too. I don't know. But this discussion is that what will Russia and China do if there's an attack on Iran? Iran is more than capable of defending itself, and it is more than capable of destroying all U.S. assets in the region and destroying those tiny regimes that are complicit in any conflict with Iran. Of course, having Russia and China and others as close friends is always very useful, economically speaking, politically speaking, militarily speaking. But Iran has prepared itself for over 2 decades for potential U.S. Attack. And so I think that I believe, as a person who's not in the military, but who's fought war and who goes to places where there are conflicts like Iraq, and when there was conflict, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, I believe that I have no doubt that Iran's conventional weapons capabilities is more than enough to make sure that the United States loses. And I think Tucker Carlson's tweet that we saw a few days ago reflects that. Tucker Carlson, I'm sure he didn't just wake up and write that tweet. He was obviously concerned, but I'm sure military people, people in the know, I don't think there's a journalist in the United States with more access to him today for obvious reasons. So when he says that we will lose, meaning the United States will lose the war, I'm sure that he's been speaking to people in the military and people who know what the reality on the ground is. So he said thousands will die and the United States will lose. And of course, it would be catastrophic for everyone. War is horrible. But the United States, according to Tucker Carlson, would lose. And I agree with that assessment. I think there's no doubt that the United States would lose. And that is what has prevented the United States from attacking Iran. If the United States thought it would win, I have no doubt that the United States would have attacked Iran. But I have no doubt, because the hatred and the of the Zionist regime and the Zionist lobby in the United States is so extraordinary when it comes to Iran. Because after all, Iran is the only country supporting the axis of resistance. It's the only country alongside Yemen, because Yemen is Ansarullah, and the Yemeni armed forces and the Yemeni government are struggling to aid the Palestinian people, and they are the government that we in Iran recognize as the legitimate government in Yemen. Besides Iran and Yemen, there's no other government that's aiding the Palestinian people, and Iran has been doing it for decades. So if they could, they would, but they can't. Although I still think they're so fanatical that they want a war, but I think so far, there are enough sane people in Washington, as reflected by Tucker Carlson's tweet, so far to make Trump think twice before doing anything absolutely stupid.
Do you think that among the Republicans, the voice of Tucker Carlson is the majority voice, or is the most influential voice?
Well, he's very big, but Christian Zionism in the United States is a very powerful force, and they are, of course, very fanatical. They're a cult that believe that Christ supports genocide. Very bizarre, or at least that's what they promote. Uh, they have, and of course, the money, I'm sure, for these Christian Zionist groups come from very powerful and wealthy people, and foolish people believe this sort of nonsense. But Tucker Carlson obviously does have a lot of influence. It doesn't really. I don't know what the majority is. I think we'd have to look at polls. But the poll recently about Israel, I think, was very interesting. And it shows that the mood in the United States has shifted away from the regime, and that the majority of Americans today, for the first time, disapprove. And I think that, yes, exactly. And that is huge. The world has moved away from Israel. That's exactly why I've been saying, as if I'm sure you recall over the past few months, that I believe that Israel is finished. I think it's in its dying days, or the dying phase, to be more precise. Now, whether it takes 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, I don't know, but I think it's a dying regime because the world has turned against it. People despise the regime. They despise Zionists. They despise these genocidal people. And now even the United States, with the mass media and the powerful and wealthy institutions and individuals who are working to keep people on board, despite all that, the majority have turned against them. And this is the case especially among younger people. So 50-year-old, I think, and above, like Republicans or something, they are staunchly supportive, but they will not be around for very long. And the younger generation has been watching this Holocaust for, we're moving towards 2 years now. Every day is like a sledgehammer hitting this stone. It's breaking it up. So I think it's going, and all of these are really they come together. And I think that ordinary people, when they see Trump waging war, not ending the war against Russia, waging economic war against the world, especially China, this tariffs issue is not going to go away, because that 10% is still an issue for all these countries. And the other tariffs against China, these are all issues that he has to resolve in 90 days. He either has to back down or there's going to be uh, a lot of difficulty. And I think already the US economy has been badly damaged and it was already in bad shape beforehand. So I don't think ordinary Americans would really be too pleased to see more war in uh, Ukraine, genocide going on in Gaza, uh, and a trade war against the world, especially a powerful China, and then at the same time a war with Iran, which would be, as Tucker Carlson says, devastating for the United States and which will bring about a defeat. I don't think ordinary Americans are too enthusiastic about that.
What it seems to me that the Trump administration started with the attacks on Yemen because they wanted, the main reason, in my opinion, to attack Yemen, which was the same sort of policy as the Biden administration was doing. It was to put Iran in a weaker position and to put pressure on Iran. It seems that that plan totally failed. That's why they're just changing their mind and they're just adjusting their policies toward Iran. How do you see the way that Yemenis were capable of fighting the United States and putting them in and just making them understand what would be the outcome of any sort of war against Iran?
I think that definitely had a lot to do with U.S. calculations. The Americans under Trump, they thought that they could defeat Yemen foolishly, but and they couldn't. And they said that we killed all these leaders, and some people believed it, but they never gave any names, not a single name. So all the Yemeni commanders, all the Yemeni leaders, they are safe and sound. And then the Americans, they kept bombing with B-2s and B-52s coming all the way from Diego Garcia and failing to destroy any of the underground installations. And so when they could not destroy these installations with their major bombers, and these airstrikes are very expensive. These planes are very expensive to maintain. They have to fly thousands of kilometers and then thousands of kilometers back, and so it's very expensive. Whether it's the Red Sea and the aircraft carrier and its accompanying ships, which had to go all the way to the north of the Red Sea to protect themselves. So all the airstrikes have to be conducted from very far away, very costly. All of these are very expensive. They all turned out to be failures, and the Americans have simply been bombing ordinary people, infrastructure, water facilities, and I think in the last 24 hours they destroyed telecom communications for civilians. They're just showing their brutality and their inhumanity, and that they're no different than their Zionist allies in Israel. And the whole thing about Yemen is about helping Israel carry out the genocide in Gaza. But I do think that their failure to destroy any of Ansar Allah's underground military installations, I think, is a major part of their calculation, because Iran has infinitely more underground installations, far more advanced technology, a huge arsenal of missiles and drones and torpedoes and all sorts of things. If the Iranians get into a fight, they have these underground bases are all over the country, and they would just wipe out everything in this region. The Americans know that, and therefore I think that is a big part of their calculation. But again, we cannot rule out conflict, because the fanaticism of Zionism is you watch it every day on TV. The slaughter of babies every day, never ending, and no protests from the media. Not a single Western diplomat resigning. Not a single government official resigning. It just shows how what the political elites in the West are like. So we can't rule out conflict. Iran has to remain vigilant. The whole axis of resistance has to remain vigilant. But I think that so far what we've seen today from what we've seen so far, it shows that the Americans recognize Iran is in a very powerful position. I think you muted yourself.
And we've learned from the Iranian team that there's going to be a second meeting in the next Saturday to talk and again to discuss the issue. Do you think that they're still thinking of having a common ground to build on, or they know what would be the common ground already? Then they're gonna have much more of the technical teams coming in and finding their sort of talks together.
Well, from what Dr. Arokchi said in his interview, the next meeting will be an extension of today's meeting, and that will create some sort of, let's say, foundation for which the actual negotiations over the nuclear program and the sanctions regime take place. So I think that if this is my understanding, if the next meeting next week is similar to today, and the Americans continue to behave reasonably, then after that, the issues of sanctions and the issues of safeguards and that sort of thing will become the key topics for discussion.
And the case of Europe and European countries is so much important. We know that in JCPOA we had Russia and China together with European countries as well. How does Iran see right now Europe and European countries? Does Iran consider a substantial role on the part of Europeans, or they're going to be out of the talks between the United States and Iran? It's just between Iran and the United States.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think the Europeans have become irrelevant over the past few years, and we saw that in Ukraine. We saw that the way in which they reacted when Trump left the JCPOA, when he tore up the deal. They have shown themselves to be completely incapable of making decisions. And now they're grumbling about Ukraine, and they're constantly speaking about how they should take a different path and be independent of the United States. But we really haven't seen anything happen. People like President Putin have said that he said that he doesn't believe that they'll be able to that they will shift away from the United States. They'll be a faithful poodle. I don't remember the exact terms that he used, the phrase that he used, but that's basically what he was saying a few weeks ago. It all depends. It depends on the Europeans. At the moment, I don't think that the Europeans really matter. They have shown themselves to be complicit with the United States in supporting genocide. They have as much blood on their hands in this Holocaust in Gaza, the slaughter in Lebanon, the dirty war in Syria, the airstrikes in Yemen, which the British, with their one or two planes, I guess, they're involved as well. And apparently others have been involved in Yemen too. I don't just mean Qatar and Saudi and the Emirates, but even other European countries. Apparently, the Italians have been involved in one way or another. So, so far, I don't think there's any sign that the Europeans can take an independent stance. The Iranians are very close to both the Russians and the Chinese. In fact, this trade war or this tariff war has moved China closer to Iran, sort of like the Ukraine war, where that tilted Russia towards Iran. Iran helped the Russians. Now we see the Chinese tilting towards Iran. There's good evidence of that that we've seen over the past few days. But and before the past few days, the past few weeks, I think the Chinese were expecting a lot of this in one form or another. But in any case, the relationship with China and Russia is very good. I don't think at the moment the Europeans are relevant, but nothing is impossible.
Just to wrap up this session, Professor Morandi, when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, and we hear the Russian officials are talking about the issues, the problems that they're facing in terms of the policy coming from Europe, from the European countries, they always mention the United Kingdom and the British government, British intelligence, and all of that. Do you think that the role of the British government and British intelligence is the same way that Russia is mentioning for Ukraine, but in the direction of the Israel? Are they running the show to help Israel in Europe?
Oh, absolutely. The British regime is particularly sinister. And they gave a lot of assistance to the Israeli regime over Gaza. And they've been trying very hard to undermine Hezbollah in Lebanon. And they are involved in their strikes in Yemen, even though they don't have a credible air force, but they want to be there. And the British have always, and this I know because I've spoken to European diplomats about this, the British have always tried to prevent Iran's relationship from improving with the European countries, especially when the British were inside the EU. In Brussels, the British always had someone in Brussels whose main objective when it came to our region was to prevent any sort of decent and meaningful relationship between Iran and European states. And that's the role that they play today as well.
Coffee. Follow me.